I'd like to call to order this regular meeting of the Lincoln-Lancaster County Planning Commission of October 11th, 2017. A printed agenda is available outside the hearing room, and a copy of the full agenda, including the staff reports, is available at the front of the chambers with the clerk. The Open Meetings Act is posted just inside the doors at the back of the room. If you are parked in the parking garage across the street to the north, please be sure to pick up a parking coupon, show right over here, on your way out for free parking. Out of courtesy for those attending this meeting, the commissioners and the staff, cellular phone usage is not permitted in these chambers during any portion of this meeting. We will appreciate your cooperation. The Planning Commission action is final on agenda item 1.2, which is special permit number 17035. Any aggrieved person may appeal final action of the Planning Commission to the City Council by filing a notice of appeal with the clerk within 14 days following the action of the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission action on all other items is a recommendation to the City Council or the County Board. The first item of business today is the approval of the minutes of the regular meeting held September 27th, 2017. Is there a motion?
So moved. Edgerton.
Second. Harris.
Jerry, please call the roll.
Beckius?
Yes.
Edgerton?
Yes.
Finnegan?
Yes.
Harris?
Yes.
Hove?
Yes.
Joy?
Yes.
Washington?
Yes.
Core?
Yes.
Shear.
Yes.
Motion carried 9-0.
The next item of business is the consent agenda. Items on the consent agenda will be called at the same time and will not be scheduled for a separate public hearing unless there is a request from someone wishing to speak or at the request of a commission member. I will ask Jerry to read all of the consent agenda items into the record. Once those items are read, she will ask if there is anyone wishing to speak. If you wish to speak on an item on the consent agenda, we would ask that you stand and state that item. That item will then be removed from the consent agenda and scheduled as a separate public hearing under Section 3 of today's agenda. All items remaining on the consent agenda will be voted upon in total with a motion for approval. Jerry, will you please call the items on the consent agenda?
Yes, thank you. Item 1.1 is annexation number 17014 to annex approximately 2.72 acres more or less for the construction of an approximate 4,000 square foot monastery on property generally located at 5600 West Adams Street. And item 1.2 is special permit number 17035 for the placement of a storage shed with waivers to reduce the front yard from 25 feet to 3 feet and the side yard from 5 feet to 3 feet on property generally located at 4028 J Street. Just note that this is final action on this special permit 17035 unless appealed to the City Council within 14 days. Are there any ex parte communications to be disclosed on these agenda items?
I see none.
Is there anyone here wishing to speak on either of these consent agenda items? If so, please stand and state that item.
I see none. We'll entertain a motion.
Move approval, Hove.
Second. Washington.
Okay.
Beckius?
Yes.
Edgerton?
Yes.
Finnegan?
Yes.
Harris?
Yes.
Hove?
Yes.
Joy?
Yes.
Washington?
Yes.
Core?
Yes.
Shear.
Yes.
Motion carried 9-0.
There are no requests for deferral, so we will now proceed to public hearings. The staff will make a brief presentation. The applicant will then be requested to present his or her testimony, followed by those who wish to testify in support, then followed by those who wish to testify in opposition. The staff will then be given an opportunity to respond to the testimony, and then the applicant shall have an opportunity for rebuttal. Each person testifying should state their name and address and shall have 5 minutes to speak unless additional time is requested and granted. The timer will go off after 4 minutes. Then you will have 1 minute to wrap up your testimony. The Planning Commission will vote immediately at the close of the public hearing unless the Commission votes to defer action or continue the public hearing. Jerry, please call the first public hearing item.
Okay. Under annexations, item 4.1 is annexation number 17015 for a city-initiated annexation of approximately 152 acres more or less on property generally located between 1st and 14th Streets on both sides of Fletcher Avenue. Staff recommendation is for approval. Are there any ex parte communications to be disclosed on this agenda item?
I spoke with Andrew yesterday to ask some questions about annexations in general, and then I spoke with the county assessor's office and the appeals board to find out a little bit more about Greenbelt.
Thank you.
Okay.
And I spoke with Andrew also.
Okay. Andrew. Paul.
Good afternoon. We just have kind of an order of things here that we're going to go through. Paul Barnes with the Planning Department. I'm going to start us off with a little bit more of the broad picture and background of what it is that brought us here today. Beginning in the mid-1990s, the City Council at that time had asked the Planning Department to put together a process for an annexation study. The community is growing. It has been growing. We have a consistent growth rate of between 1.2 and 1.3%. Today and in recent years, that's between 3,000 and 4,000 people each year coming to Lincoln. And so a lot of this development has been and continues to occur on the edge of the community. And in order to accommodate that growth, of course, annexation is required. We need land to develop those housing units, those employment centers, and everything else that makes our community. I'll just note, since the annexation study process was developed in the 90s, we have had several of these come forward. The last of those was done in 2008. So I have a few things that I'm going to show on the overhead. So the annexation policy that we have for Lincoln is rooted in the Nebraska state statutes. And the state statutes vary depending on which class of city you are. Lincoln is a primary class city, and so this is the section that applies to us. And basically it states that the City Council may at any time annex lands that are contiguous to us in any direction, and they can deem that to be proper as how they wish. So I think that it's important to look at this. This is where our local annexation policy embodied in our comprehensive plan comes from. A little more on the local level and embodied in our annexation policy. There are several reasons why we do city-initiated annexation. Typically, a normal development would come forward and along with rezoning and other requests, would request an annexation. This is a different case because it's city-initiated. We are the applicant. So these are the reasons for that. The first one up there that you see is equity for all taxpayers. There are over 280,000 residents in Lincoln, and everyone in the city limits is paying those property taxes. Some of the edge developments that are not in the city limits but are adjacent to or contiguous do get some of the benefits for being residents without paying those taxes, such as streets, such as trails, parks, things like that. Also, another reason is for clarity of service areas. This applies to areas such as road maintenance, but also to emergency services. And we do have Assistant Chief Pat Bork here. He will speak to some of that as well. And then third, we like to do this study to allow for orderly and efficient growth of our community. We like to grow in ways that make sense for our investments, good policy for taxpayer dollars. And so as part of this study, we want to make sure that we are growing in that manner and not leapfrogging or leaving gaps of county jurisdiction. So then we take this over into specific language that is in the city-county comprehensive plan. This language was adopted in several plans, but was reaffirmed most recently in the 2016 comprehensive plan update. And it's giving us some guidance further refining what the state statute allows. So what we do is we look at areas in the priority B, growth tier 1 areas that are contiguous to the city. So we're not looking at flag annexations or corridor type annexations. These are all areas that are contiguous and touching existing city limits, which I guess is that second sentence there. Land that is remote or otherwise removed from the city is not considered part of this study. Some more text that applies to the areas we're looking at today does refer to acreage developments. And we do acknowledge that these acreage developments have a certain way of life. There's things out there that, even with annexation, would remain unchanged. Zoning is going to stay the same. Unless requested by one of the property owners, the zoning change is not part of this annexation package. We also recognize that there will be some costs going from a county jurisdiction to a city jurisdiction. And part of that process of an annexation study is to have open conversations to explain to people in public meetings and in written material that some of these things will change. Just a couple more here. Again, word-for-word statement from our comprehensive plan: character of existing residential areas should be respected as much as possible. Looking at those acreage areas, we're supportive of that and continue to have that discussion. And again, with acreage areas, we should be taking these additional steps and having these meetings. We did hold 4 public meetings for the neighborhoods. Each one of them were open to the public. Those were held in late August. We did have presentation material, we had written material. In addition, we've put together a website for the annexation study and the package, and all of our presentation material has been available there as well. I think we're going to hear concerns of certain things that will change upon annexation, and we do recognize that. But what we have put together in our policy, in our comprehensive plan, and directly coming from state statute is that we have criteria that are outlined for us to look at. And these criteria are listed here. So we need to be looking at areas that meet these criteria, bringing before you and City Council recommendations for annexation. Land that's in Tier 1 priorities A and B, land that's engulfed by city limits, or land that is contiguous or touching existing city limits and in urban zoning, or land that is contiguous to city limits in ag zoning. Basic infrastructure is in place, that's key to this group of annexations, and is urban in character. After going through this process, we recognized that all of these brown areas on this map completely around the city of Lincoln, existing city limits, meet at least one of those criteria. That's thousands of acres. Part of this annexation study is to analyze these areas and make some sense of what should be brought forward with recommendations. So we did that and came up with these 8 sub-areas. These are the 8 sub-areas that don't meet one criteria, they meet more than one. And for 2 or more reasons are being brought before you for recommended annexation. So that's a lot of background. It's going to apply to the next item as well. I'll just point out sub-area A is this first item. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Andrew.
Andrew Theroff, planning staff. So let's focus in on the area we're talking about here. It's between 1st and 7th, or 1st and 14th Street, around Fletcher. The interstate's right here. The white area is existing city limits. The blue area is what's proposed for annexation. This area is 152 acres. It includes 24 dwelling units, 2 churches, a tree farm, and then something to note is the street jurisdictions. You can see I-80 is in the city, outside, and then back in the city. Fletcher's in the city, outside, back in the city, outside, back in the city. So this would address kind of that odd jurisdictional issue of the streets switching back and forth between county and city jurisdiction. Let's back up and just get a little context for where we are. This is Northwest Lincoln. The area for annexation is blue. City limits are white. You can see it's a pretty clear notch, pretty far inside the existing city limits, almost surrounded, but not quite. Fallbrook's on the west. We have Heartland's Garden Valley up here, the Lynx Apartments, and then Stonebridge Creek. So it's got urban development on 3 sides of it. I want to walk back to the equity issue that Paul had mentioned. So at this particular area, we actually have 20 homes that have driveways onto an existing city street today. All the properties along Fletcher, all the properties here on 7th, and then all these properties along 14th. North 14th is actually an urban improved arterial. It has a trail. There are hydrants in 14th. There's also hydrants in portions of Fletcher. So the question we've been getting with all of these annexations is, what are my benefits to being annexed? What am I getting out of this? And our main response to that is that you're already getting big benefits of being located where you are. In this particular case, they're using city streets just as much as any other city resident would. Parks, trails, city services like that. Residents in this blue area are using those things at the exact same level as these surrounding residents in the white areas. The residents in the white areas are paying for them. The residents in the blue areas are not paying for them. So we're talking about all this other stuff. That equity issue is really what this is about. That's the big thing to remember, is that these properties are already getting big benefits from being almost in the city, essentially in the city. I'm going to touch on infrastructure. So one of our criteria is that basic infrastructure is available. That doesn't literally mean that the local sewer and water lines are in front of your house. So when we think about a new development, the city pays for the large trunk lines. They're kind of regional lines, you could say. The local lines in front of the house are not paid for by the city. They're paid for by in a new development, they're paid for by the developer and then passed along to the property owner as part of their lot cost. So when we look at these surrounding areas here and here and down here, these property owners all paid for the sewer and water in front of their house when they bought their lot. So in the area of this annexation, it'd be the same situation. They would be paying for the local sewer and water lines to go in front of their house. In this case, it would be through an assessment district. And an important thing to stress with that is a completely separate process. Assessment district can be requested separately. It goes through Board of Equalization and then Planning Commission. So that would be a whole separate set of hearings if someone's looking to do an assessment district. I just want to be sure and point out that infrastructure is available. There's a sewer and water network available. And just like anywhere else in the city, if the property owners want sewer and water, they would pay for it, for the local lines. One of the most probably direct and immediate new benefits is fire. So we'll have Pat Bohr come up and discuss the benefits they'll be getting out of LFR in terms of fire response and ambulance.
Good afternoon, Pat Bohr, Lincoln Fire and Rescue, Assistant Chief. You can look at a fire department in many different ways. I could give you my opinion about it, but I don't think that means a whole lot. So what I'd like to do is show you some things from our annual report, talk about the Insurance Service Organization, and talk about the CARES Registry. So let me start with ISO, the Insurance Service Organization. It's an independent organization that rates agencies in communities on their ability to suppress fires. We just recently were reviewed and re-rated, and our current rating today is Class 2. It's a 10-point scale from 1 to 10, 1 being the very best, 10 being the very lowest. It is a 0 to 100 scale, and we're at 85. We believe in a couple of years, when we build the stations that we're proposing to build, and change some things internally, we can get to a 1. So according to the Insurance Service Organization, we're among the best fire departments in the country. And what that evaluation means is that they're evaluating your ability to suppress fires. It's specifically about fires. It's not really about EMS. It's about your fire suppression capability. It's a fire service rating schedule that they use. So ISO is an independent company. We're not affiliated. They do this work throughout the country, and they rate agencies within communities. And currently we're a Class 2. And we believe that we can get to a Class 1 and be among the very best in the not too distant future. Another way to measure a fire department is their their EMS capability. And if I could use the overhead here, I'll show you this graph. What this shows you is that for out-of-hospital cardiac arrest last year, we had survival rates of 72.2, over 72%. And the measurement tool was the CARES registry. It's not an internal measurement tool. It is a nationwide measurement tool that evaluates departments and agencies across the country. So it's not a tool that we developed or came up with, but it's a nationwide measuring tool. And we were the very best in the country for out-of-hospital cardiac arrest. No one beat us. The national average is 25%. Some communities in the country are 0. So Lincoln does very well. Lincoln Fire does very well with EMS. So then the other thing that you would want to look at as you're trying to determine whether or not Lincoln Fire has the ability to serve the proposed annexed areas is our ability, again, going back to fire service, fire suppression. What this particular chart shows you is that response time is important. It's not just the equipment that you have. It's not just that where your building is located. The difference is if you're in the building, and the difference is how you measure the different components of response time. What this chart shows you is that the response time continuum starts with the alarm processing component. So the people at the communications center, how long they take to process that call. And then the next component is how long it takes you from the time you hear the call in the station to get to the vehicle and start moving. That's an important piece. We're at the station. My firefighters live at the stations 24/7 every day of the year. And so the next component is travel time. So again, you may hear some information. You may see some other things about where stations are located and the ability to do certain things, but you can't begin to do anything unless you can get there. And you can't, and you can do that most effectively when you get there quick. And so if you live in the station and you measure your response time, which we do, that enables you to get there quickly. So with that, I don't know if I entertain questions or that comes later.
Yeah, any of us can take questions now.
Are you ready for questions?
Yeah.
Okay. Questions?
I have one for Chief Bohr. As you know, we've had a house fire, and we've also had to use EMS. And we're very fortunate we live close to a fire station. It was probably 3 minutes, and it seemed like an eternity, but they were there. Can you assure me that in both of these cases, I probably will ask this again, but you feel comfortable that you can serve these areas?
Yes. You will see, if I can look at the overhead again, please. What this map basically shows you is the distribution of our stations. So not only is one station important, I mean, if you have a station next door to your house, it's not really very effective if no one's there.
That's right.
And so that's why distribution is important. That's why we're building new stations, because we know that distribution is important, because Lincoln Fire and Rescue responded to 25,000 calls last year. So the chance that the station that is right next door to you, that they're there are percentages that I can give you that will tell you if they're there or not. But if they're not there, then you need to rely on the next closest one. So what this map shows you is we have pretty good distribution, and we will have better distribution in the future because we're building new stations. Did that answer your question?
It did, and you're a great fire department, so.
Thank you.
I have a question since this map is up. Do you have a map that shows future stations? I know we've talked about some here in the last few months.
I don't know.
Yes.
We are, okay, yes. While we're waiting for that map, I can tell you that there is going to be we're going to be net positive 2. We're moving 2 and we're building 2 brand new. We currently have 14 stations, and within 2 years we'll have 16.
Okay.
And we're looking at 17th as well, so. So that's what this map shows you is all 16 stations.
So it's kind of hard to see here, but these white stations here are the
4 new ones.
So from this location that we're looking at to the nearest station,
Thank you.
how far is that? And is that going to improve?
The Station 14 is the closest station to the annexation that we're looking at. It's within 2 miles. That leads to another question, which is how long, what is travel time? We calculate travel time about 2 minutes a mile, which is really about 30, 35 miles an hour, which is the speed limit for most areas. We can go faster than that, obviously. We have traffic control devices that we take advantage of. But overall, we just calculate 2 minutes a mile. So the proposed annexation is within 2 miles. So we should be there within about 4 minutes.
And that station is there
That station is
already?
currently there today. Yes, sir.
Okay. And are there fire hydrants in this?
Yes, sir. There is a fire hydrant map that shows hydrants distributed all along Fletcher from 1st to 7th.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
What is the standard for fire hydrant placement? Like, how far are they recommended to be apart?
About 300 feet,
So about one per block.
1 per block.
Other questions?
Andrew, can you tell me on the annexations that we did last time, did they all have access to fire hydrants already? I tried to look as best as I could. I know a lot of them were.
The 56th and Fletcher property would have been close to hydrants between 56th and 70th. The annexation in the southeast corner was just the back half of an existing house lot. The one in the southwest, I'm not sure how close they were to hydrants, but there were hydrants in the area.
May I elaborate on your question? It'll probably come up here in the not too distant future. So hydrants are the best source of water. I mean, it's virtually an unlimited supply of water. The second best is to be able to relay water, meaning to move it from the hydrant over a long distance to the final location. And we do that by placing fire engines at intermediate distances to boost the pressure and keep it moving down the line until you get it to the destination. All of our fire engines carry at least 750 feet of 5-inch hose. So we send 3 engines and 2 trucks to every fire. So if you calculate 3 times 750, you're going to get over 2,000 feet, which is close to a half of a mile. So we can easily relay water from the hydrant to a location over 2,000 feet away very easily with the normal apparatus that we send to a fire. So a hydrant is the best source of water because it's virtually unlimited. A tender or a tanker, some people know them as tankers. A big truck that carries water is also is probably the second best, if you will. But it has limited supply. It can only bring what it carries, either 5,000 or 2,500 or whatever the capability is. And then there is also, you can, with certain apparatus, you can actually draft water out of a pond or a reservoir or something like that. So we have the ability to, and we train on a frequent basis, the ability to relay water over long distances.
So in this particular case, focusing here, where the locations of the hydrants are currently would allow you sufficient hose to reach all the properties in that area.
Yeah, I think Andrew and we measured those this morning, and I don't think there's any distances over. There's some just like 2,040 feet and 2,039 feet. So I think within that area.
Yeah, this is about a little over 2,000 feet from a hydrant there.
Okay. We'd be able to reach all those.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions?
Yeah, I have some questions that aren't related to fire, so
Okay.
we'll let you off the hot seat.
Okay.
Was it intentional?
No. I'm just extremely funny like that. Andrew, can you tell me, I know you mentioned a tree farm on this one. Can you just show me where that's at on the map?
Yeah. So the tree farm is right there.
Is it that whole parcel?
Yeah.
Okay. In the report, it mentioned that North 7th has a portion that is not paved. In the future, what happens when it's time to pave that? Is that something that there will be a special assessment district for that? The neighbors will have to pay for it, or is that something that the city will undertake?
I believe it's just a local street in this location, so for now it would remain gravel. It probably wouldn't get paved until this area subdivides and redevelops more, and then it would be paved as part of that project.
And so then the developer would have to assume those costs?
Yeah.
Okay. I think I misunderstood last time when we met, when you guys said you had 4 informational meetings. So you had 4 meetings in total for all of these annexations, not 4 meetings per area?
No, 4 total, and on the invites, we said one area was, so like we had one meeting focused on this area, and that meeting was actually held in the Northern Lighthouse Church, which is right here. But then we did let people know there are these 3 other meetings that you can attend if you can't make this one meeting.
You kind of had one in each quadrant.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that's it for right now.
Okay, others?
Are all these homes supported by sewer and water that city provides?
Sorry. can you repeat
Currently,
that?
sewer and water are provided to these?
No, none of these
No.
homes have city sewer water.
We wouldn't provide the services outside of the city limits. It's a concurrency policy, been in place for many years. If they want to, which the services are in place to attach and then, extend to their property, that would be done through an assessment district.
And so what would be the timing of that? They could do that right away if they got annexed in?
Yeah, it's initiated by the property owners. So they would petition for it, and then it would go to the Board of Equalization to set the rates, and then City Council ultimately approves it.
Got it.
Sandra?
It was mentioned in the report that this area was previously looked at in an earlier annexation study, and it was brought forward in 2008, and it didn't pass. Could you explain why?
Yeah, and I think this is one that was actually withdrawn.
Okay, it was
so
withdrawn.
So it didn't actually go all the way forward.
Why was it withdrawn?
So back in 2008, it was a much larger annexation we were looking at. There was actually an area to the south that wasn't in the city at the time that was included, and then a bunch of properties up here weren't included, or were included. And in 2008, 2008 was another one of those years where we hadn't done it in a while. So we had a lot of annexations going forward, and some of our annexation areas were just really large. What we ended up doing this time around is saying, let's narrow those down and really focus on the areas that obviously can get water and sewer really easily. Last time we included a bunch of properties up here to the north. This is the edge of a basin just north of here. So they're getting to the edge of our really sewerable area. So we left those out this time. They're still sewerable. They're something we're going to look at the next time around, next 2 or 3 years. But we really just wanted to focus in on these blue areas, which are much more obvious for annexation this time around. So in terms of why we withdrew it last time, it just became unmanageable. There were so many properties involved, and there was a lot of things happening with some of the other annexations that we wanted to withdraw some of them at the time. So.
Thank you.
Andrew, is it my understanding that there are some property owners in this area that want sewer and water?
We've heard from some. So our meeting was in the Northern Lighthouse Church. They can't drink that water there. They turn on the faucet, it smells really bad. And we heard from a couple other property owners at the meeting that they can't use their water either. Their wells just aren't good. So yes, they would be interested in city water.
So can I piggyback on that for a second? So what are they doing for water, for drinkable water?
The church, it was jugs of water.
They have to go out and buy water. Okay.
And then one more question on the whole fire issue. When does the city decide whether it needs to add hydrants in an unannexed area? And is it a distance issue, and how does that play out? I'd like to know a little bit more about that.
So I could just answer that quickly and then turn it over to Pat. I think the hydrants for a district that doesn't have water today would typically be installed through the assessment district process. That would be part of that. Mm-hmm. Just to keep that in mind, that could happen at the request of the property owners in the future.
And in addition to that work, I work with the Public Works Department, the engineers, when they are designing new hydrants or they're designing new water mains. I meet with them and we plan out the hydrants for the new water mains. So some additional work that I'm involved in.
So for example, on this map that we have up where the hydrants are located along Fletcher there, not that long ago, that area was not in the city. And so when were those hydrants added? And what was happening at the time that those hydrants went in?
They would have been added when the water line was installed.
Okay.
So yeah, I'm assuming that's for the Lynx apartments when those went in.
Yeah, usually when the water mains are extended, we add the hydrants as well, because when you're digging up the ground or doing whatever you're doing, it's easy to add the hydrants at that time.
Got it. Thank you.
And to be really specific, Andrew, let's take the Lynx as an example. Who paid for those fire hydrants when they were installed?
The Lynx paid for those.
Thank you.
And at what point would hydrants be added along Fletcher between 7th and 14th?
It would be when the residents request a water assessment district. So it could be, I mean, if someone wants to request it.
Well, that's for their homeowners' use, not for fire and safety
Yeah, but that gives them the opportunity then to put in.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, if someone requests it right away, there could be hydrants in here somewhat quickly.
Okay.
And just to be clear, that cannot happen unless and until the area was annexed.
Correct. Yep.
Maya, you had a question?
What's the critical mass needed to create an assessment district?
Can't answer that. It varies depending on the improvement. Typically for utility assessment districts, you just need one property owner. There's no minimum threshold, at least to file the petition. That's just the very first step, and I think that goes to the city clerk who gets the process started. For roads assessment districts, you need at least 50% or the majority to sign on to that petition to get that started.
So can other homeowners protest a request to create an assessment district if they're divided on whether they want one or not?
Yeah, so there's an open public process for that. And the Board of Equalization, is presented a recommendation from staff. There's a lot of analysis that goes into that. Ultimately, the City Council will make that decision. So there's public hearings. There's time for people to have input and support or oppose that request.
Thank you.
So one item to follow up on the Fletcher question. This area here is part of this Heartland Gardens Valley. There's a approved plan. So once this develops, hydrants will be put in this portion of Fletcher.
Okay, thank you.
Is that also kind of why that area isn't included in this annexation request right now?
It's already in.
It's already
Yeah, it's already in. It's kind of hard to tell here, but
Sorry.
it's in the city.
Colors. Yeah. Other questions? I don't see any questions. Thank you. Is there anyone here wishing to testify in support of this agenda item? Okay. Is there anyone here wishing to testify in opposition of this agenda item? Okay. Are there any additional staff questions? No? Okay. I think since the city is the applicant, we're ready to entertain a motion then.
Move approval, core.
Second, Beckius.
Discussion.
After the last meeting, I decided I needed a lot more background work in annexations. And though my concerns for this one really had to do with the Greenbelt status and the tree farm losing its Greenbelt status, because they're not here today to argue against this, I feel much more comfortable with this one, and so I support the annexation of this proposal. I think it meets the criteria as laid out in the study, and I think it's going to provide a lot of health and safety benefits and clarity for first responders so that it clears up who's going to respond, especially along the Interstate 80 corridor. And because of tax equity reasons, I believe this is a good proposal.
Others? I agree. I appreciate the additional more detailed information. This meeting is very excellent, so I'm going to support the motion as well. Please call the roll.
Okay, and this is for the approval of annexation 17015. Beck, yes?
Yes.
Edgerton?
Yes.
Finnegan?
Yes.
Harris?
Yes.
Hove?
Yes.
Joy?
Yes.
Washington?
Yes.
Core?
Yes.
Shear?
Yes.
Motion carried, 9-0. Next item is agenda item 4.2, annexation number 17016 for a city-initiated annexation of approximately 203 acres, more or less, on property generally located at 84th or between 84th and 95th Streets, south of Holdridge Street. Staff recommendation is for approval. Are there any ex parte communications to be disclosed on this agenda item?
I received a phone call from Dan Henna and talked to him, explained the process, and he had sent a letter to me, and I shared that with the planning department. And so you have what I've heard from him.
Thank you.
I have one as well. Same gentleman stopped, Mr. Howe, not the same gentleman, Mr. Howe stopped by my house. And we chatted a little bit, but not so much about the application, but he left me a letter, and I think he shared that letter with the planning and other commissioners as well.
And he stopped by my house also, and we talked, but we didn't talk about what was in his letter. So it was a very pleasant conversation, and I promised to read the letter, but that was it.
Thank you.
Okay.
And Joy, I called the school district of Waverly to see the process of getting a child into their school district if they're not in the school district.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Paul Barnes with the Planning Department. I'm not going to go over as much detail as I did previously, but just a couple of things to restate. But basically, all of that does apply to this case as well. Just going back to the reasons why the city does initiate these, again, that equity for all taxpayers piece being kind of that big one at the top. The area that you will see does have development contiguous to it on three sides, and does take access today to what would be a county jurisdiction road, but east and west would need to go through city jurisdiction. So paying for those road maintenance items and things like that, part of that equity. Clarity of service areas, again, I think we'll have Pat Bohr address some of this, but there is kind of this gap in between LFR, Lincoln Fire and Rescue Service, and then this subdivision that we're looking at, and then also some of the jurisdiction bouncing back and forth along Holdridge Street. And then lastly, just the orderly and efficient growth. We have continued, and with the comprehensive plan supporting this, continued development to the east. This area again is in our future service limit. Waterford Estates is to the east. We know that we can provide services out there, and to make sure that that's continued to be orderly and efficient, this is why we're looking at this area. So, and I think that you've received several comments from property owners in this area. I think a lot of those have to do with fire response and equipment and service, so we will have Pat address those. But again, bringing this back to the criteria that we as a community in the city-county comprehensive plan have adopted and recognize, we need to be looking at these areas, priority A and B, growth areas, land that's engulfed by city limits or contiguous. This subdivision is contiguous to the city limits on three sides. Also looking at the infrastructure that's in place. Is the basic infrastructure there? I think Andrew's going to show you some maps that show that it is. And is this area in urban character? I think with that, I'll turn it over to Andrew.
Andrew Theroff, planning staff. So looking at this area specifically, it's It's the area in blue. 203 acres, 29 dwelling units. There's a church in the northwest corner. To give some context of where we're at, here's Waterford Estates. This is Holdridge on the north. So there's Waterford Estates on the east, Southeast Community College is on the south, several different urban developments along the west, and then to the north. I'm going to reiterate the equity piece that I mentioned last time. The big question or the big comment we keep getting is that the residents aren't getting any benefit from this annexation. In our opinion, they're already getting big benefits from their location today. As you can see, this chunk of Holdridge is not in the city today, but on both sides, it's in the city. If they go out any of these other local streets, they're driving on city roads. Residents literally can't leave the neighborhood without driving on city roads. I think it's safe to assume residents in this blue area are using streets, parks, trails, city services at the exact same level as all of these residents surrounding them. These residents are all paying taxes for it. The residents in the blue area are not. So that's that equity piece that we're talking about, and that's kind of the main thing to remember here. I will touch on infrastructure. You can see there's a really well-developed sewer and water network surrounding this site today. There's actually sewer water stubbed up on these local streets and up here. So looking at these surrounding neighborhoods, the local sewer and water lines were paid for by those residents when they bought the lot. They paid for it. The city didn't pay for it. So here, if these residents want sewer and water lines in front of their house, they would pay for it, just the same as everybody else in the city. That would be paid for by an assessment district, and as we've mentioned, that's somewhat of a separate process. There's a whole different hearing for that, and discussions of costs are really separate from the annexation discussion. It just means that once they're annexed, they do have the opportunity to ask for that. There is something kind of unique about Sunrise Estates, and we'll look at that real quick. This was approved in 1989 as a build-through acreage. It was basically adjacent to the city when it was approved in 1989, and back then there was a lot of discussion about well, this is going to be annexed in the coming decades. How do we address that? So the solution at the time was to approve this as a build-through acreage. And I kind of zoomed in just so we can see it. So essentially we have the large 3-acre lots. At time of approval, there was actually ghost lots, you could call them, or we approved these smaller lots so that the area could be more easily subdivided in the future, because it was clear that this was going to be in the city at some point. It's close to the city, it's going to be surrounded, it's going to be annexed. So what happened is when some, say like this lot, someone builds a house, they put their house on one of these pieces so that in the future it could be subdivided more easily. The idea of infrastructure came up back in 1989. So we actually added this note to the plan back when it was originally approved, just so it was clear everyone was on the same page. The note says, the owner of each lot shall agree to the cost involved in abandoning any existing individual well and septic systems, to the cost of future public water and sewer main extensions required to serve the lots within the development, to the cost of service connections to those mains, and to the cost of future paving of roadways. So that's our policy anyway. But back in 1989, when this was getting approved, it came up that, yeah, this is going to be surrounded. It's going to be annexed in the coming decades. People are going to be opposed to it. So we just want to be very clear on how this process works. So from day one on this plan, it's basically explained who's paying for these local sewer water lines or if they want to upgrade the roads. And I guess something I should explain on the build-through acreage, annexation doesn't mean these have to be subdivided. That'd be a whole separate thing. It'd be a separate change of zone, and then new final plat application. So this doesn't mean it has to be subdivided. Really the purpose of me showing you this is just that from day one, this was always planned to eventually be in the city, because it was known the city was going to go around this soon. So with that, I'll just leave the hydrant map up here and let Pat come up and address some of the LFR questions we've had.
Pat Borer, Lincoln Fire. So just 2 additional points and then answer any questions that you might have. As you can see from the map, there are a number of hydrants that completely surround the proposed annexed area that we can tap into and bring water to pretty much any area within the proposed annexed area. So I just want to point that out. And then, I don't remember my other point, so.
So what is the distance across?
Again, this is what we looked at this earlier, and we measured the distances. And from this hydrant here on East Avon all the way over to north, I think that's 93rd. That would be the longest distance potentially, and that was just right over 2,000 feet.
So then the 2,000 feet that you had mentioned
Yeah,
would
again,
cover
750 on each engine company multiplied by 3 that we normally send. And there are there have been areas in the city in the past, like Firethorn, for example, when that was annexed, had no hydrants within that development. And we made special provisions by putting extra hose on those companies, and so we could get to the longer distances that didn't have hydrants. So this is just our standard complement of hose, but we have made in certain situations additional provisions for those areas that didn't have what was needed. So.
And where's the nearest fire station?
That was my second point. Thank you. The nearest fire station currently is either at Station 9 on Cotner and Vine or 84th and South. 84th and South is station number 12. We're proposing to move it to 84th and Pioneers, but we're proposing to build a brand new station on 84th and Layton. So it will be within a couple of miles of this proposed annexed area.
What's the timing for that?
Well, if I could get the landowner to negotiate with me better, I would. I'm in negotiations now, and we propose to have those structures built within 2 years of now.
Are your times good, do you think, to get to the annexed area from Cotner and Vine? And
Yeah, I think I do. With our current station distribution, we don't have the distribution we really like, which is why we're proposing to build more. But we can get to the area, yeah, from Station 9, Station 12, or Station 5 even.
And in how many minutes?
I don't know the exact distances, but if we calculate 2 minutes a mile, okay. I don't know the exact distance. And you might have that in a letter from one of the...
2.7 miles.
Yeah. 2.7 miles, so that would be about 5 minutes.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome. Question? Tom?
Andrew, thank you for the historical context on the build through. I appreciate that very much. This is not a fire question. If you want to take a seat, I apologize. Andrew, could you, from that historical context a little bit, this subdivision was adjoining to the annexed city when it was created. Mm-hmm. And I think that Meadow Lane right across 84th Street dates back to the 60s. So this area has been near the city for quite a while. Can you tell me a little bit about the process as to how the developer, when they decided to create this subdivision, would have gone through and thought out whether or not this is going to be a part of the city or not, and then what services they chose to provide or not provide to these properties at that time?
Yeah, so the short answer on why it wasn't part of the city is we couldn't provide services. We couldn't get sewer out there. It was on the other side of a ridge. So that's why it was not annexed at that time. Mm-hmm. But now we can provide sewer there. So.
Okay, and when did that become available?
It's whenever Stevens Creek was put in up there. Yeah.
Okay.
What about the area to the north that's not included?
Yeah, so this is one of those areas that Paul had mentioned that we flagged originally when we were looking at this. And this is going to be one of those areas we look at next time we do this, next 2 or 3 years. The reason it's not included now is, one, you can kind of tell there's no public streets serving these lots. It's a bunch of flag lots stacked on top of each other. So exactly where sewer is going to go is somewhat of a question right now. It's possible, but it's somewhat of a question. There's also a ridge line somewhere in this area, so it is a little more complicated to get sewer to. It's possible to get sewer there. It's just a little more complicated than this area. So as I've mentioned with these areas, we've really wanted to focus down on the most obvious areas. There's already public streets here. There's sewer and water stubbed up to the edges of these streets. It's very clear how these areas are going to be served with sewer and water. It's just not so clear once you get north of Holdridge.
Are there other areas in town that have lots, acreages of this size that are currently part of the city?
Yes, we have about 450 lots in the city today that are an acre or above, and it's something like 95 lots that are 3 acres or above. So out of that 450, 95 of those are 3 acres and above. So we do have quite a few lots today that are acreages.
Thank you.
And when a ghost plat was laid down on this subdivision, what were the number of subdivided lots that were available within any of the lots?
Roughly, each lot was split into then 3 new lots. So I'm not sure what the total number was, but it's 65, somewhere around mid-60s probably.
But still large lots, 1 acre lots.
1 acre lots.
There was a comment in one of the letters in opposition that Lincoln Public Schools will not provide buses. Is that accurate?
Yes. I'd want the property owners to confirm that with LPS, but from our conversations with LPS, it is LPS buses if it's 4 miles or more away from a school. This area is not 4 miles away from the nearest elementary school, so they would not be bused.
It also says that you can request to have your children attend the school where they're attending. Will they then be able to use the Waverly buses?
That would be up to Waverly. I don't know the answer.
Another request that you put in, basically?
I'm not sure. I mean, we wouldn't be involved with that, so I'm not sure how that request process would go, but that would be up to the Waverly School District.
And if I can just, one more on that. So the staff report says, annex property owners are required to continue paying the levy on outstanding bonds to school districts that were approved while they were within that school district.
Yep.
They don't have to pay for LPS except if it's done after they've been annexed. So you've talked a lot about the equity. You use the equity argument quite a bit. Where does that fall on the equity scale? The fact that they may be in a position where they're paying for 2 districts.
Well, essentially, they'd be paying for the bonds that they would have voted on. So I think in terms of equity, that's probably the most fair solution for that. But yeah, so they're not paying for LPS, but they're paying for Waverly bonds. I don't know if it's an exact 1-to-1 ratio, but it's still somewhat of a comparable payment that each school's bonding is.
And do we know what the weight of those bonds for the Waverly School District are on the property owners right now?
I don't know the specific numbers. I just know when we've looked at them, they're comparable to LPS, the LPS bonding.
Okay.
Tracy had a question, and then Dean.
Okay. On your agency review report, which you listed the various agencies that had reviewed it,
yeah.
You did include this school district, Waverly School District, on there, and it said in review.
Yeah, so we separately contacted them too and sent them all this information, and they were looking at it, and I'm not sure if they're here today or not.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Dean, and then
would you clarify for me, if they chose to have their child still in Waverly, they would still pay for the Waverly bonds, but they're annexed into Lincoln, would they start paying Lincoln bonds at the time? No, okay.
Only if it's approved after.
Yes, they would.
New bonds.
But the taxes and bonding wouldn't change, just their student would be going to Waverly. So they'd be paying any new LPS bonds and then the LPS levy as well.
Tracy Core.
I noticed when reading the report from this annexation to the previous one, you estimated that property taxes would increase about 21% based on this one and only 11% based on the last one. Can you tell me what is causing that difference there?
The last one was an LPS. This one isn't.
That's
so
what
there's
I
that school
wondered.
district switch.
Christie, did you have your hand up?
No, I'm okay.
Okay.
They
You had a
asked
quick-
that question.
Okay. Other questions?
I have a couple
Go ahead.
fire-oriented follow-up. In some of the, we received a lot of information or comments from concerned citizens about issues revolving around fire. And it looks like there's a southeast station at 84th and Holdridge, is that correct?
That's correct.
So in the city limits?
In the city limits. Yeah, if there were a fire there, we would go to it.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Just following up on that, if this area were to be annexed, how long, I mean, I don't want you to speculate, but I'm going to ask you to anyway. How long do you think before that facility would move to the east, for example? Does it make sense to have a rural fire department in the middle of the city?
No, I don't think so. I really can't speculate on the question. We've approached Southeast Rural Fire District officials on a number of occasions and asked them if they'd like to do a joint venture, knowing that they had a station within the city and within the area where we wanted to build a new station. And verbally, they indicated they did not want to do a joint venture, and then formally in a letter they provided to us that they did not want to do a joint venture. I can't speculate as to why, but that was their response.
Okay. Thanks.
And they're a volunteer fire department?
That's correct. They're a volunteer fire district.
Thank you.
One last fire question. So we had another letter in opposition that listed a story from Channel 1011. It talks about a major house fire near 112th and Holdridge, and it was basically listing it as an example of what can happen. Are in your mind, are these comparable locations?
Is that article referring to the home in Sky Ranch Acres?
1241 Piper Way.
Piper Way, that's in Sky Ranch, yeah. The article says that we worked together, so what that means is there's a mutual aid agreement. Lincoln Fire has a mutual aid agreement with all of the volunteer fire districts that surround the city. There are 17 of them, and we have an agreement with all of them that if they need our help, we'll come help them. If we need their help, they'll come help us. One of the ways that we oftentimes call them is they have awesome equipment that can go off-road. We have a great road network in the city and have very little need to go off-road. And so if we have a grass fire in a park or something like that, or if there's a cornfield or a bean field within the city limits, we'll call one of our partners in the mutual aid agreement, ask them to come help us because, again, they have great equipment. But out there at that, and so when that fire came in, it was in the city limits, and so we were responding to it. And I talked to the incident commander who worked that incident yesterday, and he said when he left the station that he works out of, he immediately asked for Southeast Rural to respond with him, and so we worked together. And that unfortunately that was the outcome. It did burn down, but we worked together on that incident.
Okay.
And one thing to kind of add on to that, so Sky Ranch Acres is out here. When we see on here, this area is surrounded by hydrants, and as Pat had mentioned, all the properties are within roughly 2,000 feet of a hydrant. So this is a little different situation than Sky Ranch Acres.
Yeah, Sky Ranch didn't have any hydrants available to us. So.
Okay, so different situation. That's the difference. Yeah. Okay.
Can you show us on the other map where that Piper Way is?
It's out here.
Okay.
And so I guess in response to citizens who have some concerns as to, these types of issues, you feel confident that you can provide appropriate protection and service to this area?
Well, I have an opinion on the matter, but again, I don't think my opinion's worth a whole lot. I would look to, we have an independent insurance organization that rated us very high, nearly the top, and based upon their criteria, not ours. And I can show you some other of our performance measurements where we saved 95% of the property value in the city last year. All that is verified, valid data. So I feel very confident that we can do that. Now, will a little bit of grass burn? Maybe. But I think, in my experience, and it's not huge, but the grass will regrow.
But adding this area does not compromise your ability?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Tom?
With acreage, other acreage subdivisions, say, who have had failing systems or what have you, that have decided or joined the city of Lincoln, just off the top of your head, how many of them have chosen to install water lines and fire hydrants that would serve a higher level of continuous water?
I can give you two examples. So I talked about Firethorn earlier.
Mm-hmm.
When that was annexed into the city, had no hydrants within the development. And we made provisions, added extra hose to the companies that surrounded the area so that we could get from the nearest hydrant on 84th all the way into the development, all the way as far east as it would go. And so we made provisions to do that. Today they have hydrants all throughout that development. South Fork, which is located approximately 70th and Highway 2, that's a development that have some hydrants, but were, when it was built, they weren't built to the standard that we use today. So all throughout that South Fork development, we don't use those hydrants because they're insufficient. So the city has a hydrant on 70th Street at the entrance to that development that we'll tap into, and then we'll lay hose throughout the entire development to provide the water that we need for any fire suppression that needs to be done there. And so there's kind of a couple of examples of one hasn't, and we don't use them at all, and that's been in the city for a long time. And another example where you have Firethorn that didn't have any, but now does today.
Yeah, I'd say most have requested it, but not all have. Here, the example on the screen is next to South Fork that Pat was talking about, 70th and Old Cheney. This area has been in the city since, I believe, 1996. They don't have water or sewer yet because they haven't requested it. But yes, most of them have requested water or sewer or both.
Thank you.
Yep.
Other questions? Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Testimony in support of this agenda item? Is there testimony in opposition to this agenda item? You know the routine.
Yeah, I'm Janelle Lust, 3800 Vermoss Place. I represent Dan and Nancy Hinna, who reside at 9500 Eastview Road. Mr. Hinna has provided written testimony to you. I just want to add a few points in addition to what is in his letter. I don't think that anybody here disputes that at some point this development is going to be annexed into the city. I think the question is, why does it have to be now? And I think if you listen to the fire chiefs, well, the fire department's testimony today, you heard an awful lot about, in the not too distant future, will be rated #1. That within 2 years, we're going to be building another fire station at 84th and Layton. And clearly, right now, this area is already served by a rural fire district that is right next to it, that is prepared to not have to daisy chain together 3 fire trucks in order to fight a fire, because they have large capacity tankers that can reach the area and get on top of small fires before they become big fires. And I think if you look at what the real issue was with the fire that was mentioned in the 1011 issue, is there was a small fire in the garage that didn't get on top, that didn't get put out fast enough. And so it spread to the house and became a total loss. With rural fire, they're ready to put out those grass fires. That may not be a big deal, but because grass grows back, but at least they can get on top of it more quickly before anything spreads. So the question you really need to ask yourself is, why not wait the 2 years until that fire station is built at 84th and Layton? Especially when we look at this map, the area directly to the north, where you can make all of the same arguments about equity, that they're using all of the city services that these people are, which happen to be public roads, is not being annexed at this time. Why would you not wait until you can make sure that the fire services are adequate in the area, and that the response time will be improved, and annex it all together? One additional point I wanted to make is, in Andrew's testimony, he said that cost to the city is really irrelevant about this area because water and sewer would be paid for by the residents in an assessment district. And I think that really misses the point a little bit, because you have to keep in mind that with an assessment district, the homeowners would pay that back over time. I think it's a 20-year period, but I could be wrong on that. So the city does have to advance the costs in order to bring water and sewer there. And so we don't have any information, even though we've asked for it, about what that initial cost for the assessment period would be. And I think even when they did the annexation study, excuse me, the costs were analyzed. For example, this is from the staff report, and if you look over at the summary of estimated costs, that is a factor that the city is looking at. How much tax revenue are they going to bring in? Boy, excuse me. How much tax revenue are they going to bring in versus the cost? And the cost of advancing the water and sewer is not included in that. And so I think that does need to be factored into the calculus of whether this is a benefit to the city to add these acreages or not, given that it's a 20-year payback period. Take any questions.
Questions? Tom?
Thank you. So is your client, I wanted to clarify, I think what I heard you say earlier at the beginning of your testimony. Is your client then agreeable to annexation at the time of the building of the new fire station, approximately 84th and Layton?
I think he's saying he realizes it's inevitable that it'll be annexed at some point. Yes.
Okay, but that's the measurement that your client is using today?
Yeah.
Okay, very good. And then, do you happen to know the response time of the Southeast Fire team?
I'm sorry, I don't have that information.
Okay. Thank you.
Perhaps you could tell me, though, where is the Southeast Rural Fire Department located? How close is it to Sunrise? I know people have said it's nearby.
It's at 84th and Holdridge.
84th
on the corner.
It's right at the corner.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Any other questions?
But they're volunteers, so they have to get to the station. So no one's at the station to respond when the alarm rings.
I believe that's correct.
Okay.
Other questions? Okay, thanks.
Thanks.
I have a question for the staff.
Well,
Oh, no,
we'll
I have to wait.
We'll wait on
Testimony in
that.
opposition.
Other testimony in opposition.
Does anybody want a copy of my notes or anything?
Please.
Take those, please, thank you.
Okay. My name's Alan Wellman. I live at 8801 Holdridge Street. I'm here representing myself and my wife. I am this piece of ground. This piece of ground right here, 36 plus acres. Okay. I bought this piece of property in the late 80s. I built a house in 1994. I'm retired, as well as my wife, and we've lived at this property. I don't want to be annexed. I didn't ask to be annexed, and I have no development plans for my property, but it's 36 acres. The property, when I first bought it, was completely bare farm ground. It was always farm ground. It was a part of an 80-acre piece that includes now Sonic, the fire station, the Fellowship Christian Church, which is next to me, and then me. It was part of a short 80 because of 84th and Holdridge. This property was my property was planted to row crops up until 1994. Then I planted alfalfa and brome grass, and it has been hay ground ever since 1994. I put this up here. I am a farm as far as the USDA Farm Service Agency is concerned. I am a farm. I have a farm number. It indicates the amount of acreage in here that is hay ground and the amount of acreage that is wasteland or trees or whatever, primary residence and buildings. And I think I will get to that in a moment. It is an active hay farm at this particular time. I've heard a couple people talk up here a little bit about things. This is what hay bales look like. This is what trailers and tractors look like. This is my hay barn. That picture was taken yesterday. There's my tractor. In case you'd like to know, that's a swather. That's what you cut the hay with right there. That picture was taken yesterday. Here's my current situation on my piece of property. I'm 1 block from the Southeast Rural Fire District. 1 block. Currently, I'm on a well septic tank. There's no accessible city or rural water nearby. There is no city sewer anywhere close. Holdridge is a 2-lane street by my property, and I might mention when I bought this property, it was a gravel road. It was a gravel road, but now it is a 2-lane paved street. It was resurfaced a couple years ago, and we thank the county or whoever for that. Holdridge has a tremendous amount of traffic on it. It's got big grain trucks. It's got concrete trucks. It's wonderful that Waterford Estates is flourishing like it is out there, but it creates a tremendous amount of construction traffic going back and forth. So for me and my tractor to get out on that street to do anything, it's kind of surprising. My neighbor, Vance Stall's in the landscaping business, and at times he can't hardly get onto the street. So it's a very, very busy street. I planted trees when I first bought this property. I have trees all around my property. I have them blocking Holdridge between me and my house and whatever. And it's kind of hard to see, but my house is 200 or 300 feet from Holdridge. And there's trees you can kind of see in the picture, that there's a little group of trees around my house. Here's my position. The benefits gained if I'm annexed now, none. Absolutely none. I'm actually worse off, I believe. Lincoln emergency fire responders currently are a long ways away from me.
Can you begin to wrap up? Your time is close.
May I have a little extra time, please?
Yes, please.
And there's no city or water very close to me that I can hook up to for me. My property does not follow almost any of the annexation criteria that these individuals have indicated to. I am not engulfed by the city limits. You can see I am not engulfed by the city limits because of the church and Sunrise. I'm not urban zoning. I'm ag farmland. I'm farmland. I might even be in the green belt. I don't even know for positive. Basic infrastructure is not in place anywhere near me and is not planned for the near future. And the property right across the street from me, already been mentioned, is not being annexed into the city either. And to me, the sewer to that property and the sewer to my property are no different issue. Particular, it's a long ways. I would just briefly want to talk about my past and recent experiences with the city of Lincoln.
Quickly.
Okay? A few years ago, they extended 84th Holdridge Street a little bit to do some development that was to the west of us. And it involved my property a little bit. And they offered a little something for it. I said, no, that's not enough. And they said, oh, you have to take it. We decide what's fair. And whatever the pittance was that I got, that's what I got. He says, we got lawyers. We'll take care of it. They established about a 50-foot by almost a block long grass median between my driveway and to the west. I've had to mow it every year since that's established. So I'm not real confident in what the city means. Here's another really, I think, important thing that hasn't been touched on. The city is planning and has under somewhat construction a 60-inch main water line from Ashland to the water tower that's on Vine Street. That 60-inch line is going to go on my north property from east to west. Now, it's been planned. The water line is actually at my west property right now. They brought it from that water tower down Carlos Drive and down Holdridge to my property. It's sitting right there. And it's at Highway 6 and 98th Street, but then it's going to have to come, and they're going to take everything out of my trees that I planted and completely destroy everything between my property line on the west side, on the north side of my property. And when is that going to happen? I don't know. I don't know. And the same thing. Somebody came to me and says, we need some easements, we need to do this and whatever. And they offered me pittance for it and whatever. And I said, no, I'm in condemnation with the city, and I haven't heard anything from them for years. I actually talked to the city attorney a while back, and he says, oh, we got it all taken care of. No, it's not all taken care of. What does the term near future mean to the city of Lincoln? South Beltway, 50 years, nothing yet. Sky Ranch house fire, kind of mentioned a little bit ago. City promised fire hydrants, none yet. This water line, been under construction for a long period of time. When's it going to happen? It's going to make a lot of difference for me, and all along Holdridge Street. It's going to come right down my north property line. When are we going to widen Holdridge? We have enough traffic out there for almost an interstate. We need a major arterial street out there with all of the things that you get on an arterial street. Here's my conclusions.
Quickly.
We need to widen Holdridge to 4 lanes or whatever it is, to at least 98th Street or beyond. Holdridge needs to have curbs and sidewalks and street lights and turn lanes and traffic signals and all the things involved with a major arterial street. Go look at Pioneer from 70th to 84th or something like that. When this water line is finished, when it's finished and it's all in there and all the restrictions involved with having that water line in there are known, when it's complete, when city sewer and water's nearby, and when any other infrastructures that you would normally expect if you were really in the city of Lincoln are in place, then I say you annex Alan and Joanne Wellman's farm into the city. Here's my last comment. Joanne and I do not believe that the assessor of Lincoln or the assessor or the city of Lincoln should have the right, the privilege, or the responsibility to determine what is the best or proper use of our property. Questions?
Questions? Dean.
When you bought your property, were you made aware that at some point you'd be annexed in?
Ma'am, I was pretty much aware that certainly it could happen. And I don't mean to be disrespectful or anything, but when the city finally decided that growth to the east of Lincoln was needed to happen just because of the things that had happened with the sewer situation, and they finally put in the Stevens Creek main sewer line down to Holdridge, which is going to get extended. That opened up a whole different package of possibilities for the east side of Lincoln. And there's developer after developer purchasing land along this side of town to be able to establish housing.
If we were to delay this and have it come back in 2 years, would you be supportive of it in 2 years? Or are your criteria?
It would help if his fire station was at 84th and Layton. And I respect this man tremendously. He's been on my property. He talked to me about putting a fire station on my property. But that's another thing that wasn't mentioned. I got an LES major power line with the big steel towers on the east side of my property. It then complicates the development somewhat of my property, and it complicated the development of the fire station. You know. Yeah, absolutely. But not maybe 2 years, because I really think the city services and this equity that we continue to talk about, driving on the roads and doing this and that and whatever, to me there's more to having a freeway running by my house that they're going to complicate given the amount of construction that's going to happen here even more.
So 2 years, not so sure, 4 years, not so sure, you have these criteria, is that?
Well, that's what, but I think the city of Lincoln has to make some decisions about some investment in infrastructure on this side of town. Okay. Doesn't that seem honest and part of it?
Thank you. Yeah.
Anybody else?
Okay, good, thank you.
Do you think you understand where my position is?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
First of all, thank you for this opportunity to be able to speak with you today. Real quick, I'm fairly new to the Sunrise Estates subdivision.
Could you give
probably
us
the newest.
Name and address?
Oh, I'm sorry,
please.
yes. My name is Ted Wolfram, and my wife is here joining me also, Carlene. We live at 1040 North 92nd Street.
Thank you.
As I mentioned, we're fairly new to the Lincoln community. My wife and I moved here about 20 months ago. One of the purposes for moving up here was to be close to our family. Both of our daughters live here in Lincoln, and we happened to find this beautiful acreage right there in Sunrise Estates, which is a mile from one daughter going one direction and a mile from the other, so it's ideal for us. One of the things that we loved about the little acreage that we found is the fact that it's a self-sufficient little piece of property. We already have a well, we have a septic system to be able to handle all that. So from a city services perspective, we felt like we were in control of what we own. We were in control of our property. I think one of the big concerns that we really did when we first looked at the property, of course, was the fire and the rescue opportunity. But then we quickly found out that the Southeast Community Fire, or Southeast Fire Department was so close by, which you can see right here. We live right here in this location. There's where that fire department is. So we are really in close proximity to what that is. This isn't the first time that my wife and I have been annexed. When we lived in Houston, we were living in a community that was not part of the city of Houston. We had volunteer departments and stuff like that to be able to do this and that. But they came in and wanted to annex our area, which I was in favor of at that time. And the reason is because prior to annexation, the infrastructure was put in place. We had the water and sewage that was put in place. Hydrants were there. And a new fire station was built and fully manned before we were actually annexed at that point in time. So when I found out that the service that were being provided to us at that point in time, it made sense for us to agree to this annexation. So at that point in time in Houston, we were in favor of it, and of course our area was annexed. And now as I look at the case within Sunrise Estates, again, this community, I personally don't feel that we have quite that infrastructure that's there. Again, we have the well, we have the septic systems. So having water and sewer brought to our point doesn't necessarily make sense because we already have that facility. We already have that capability. But the one thing I guess was with the fire, we do have that Southeast Fire Department so close by. One of the things I did was I did some research on my own about the fire, and one thing that I did research, and I think this was brought up very, very clearly by the assistant fire chief, is the fact that Houston Fire and Rescue is an excellent organization. Their numbers speak for themselves, and I think he brought that up when he was talking about that. But what we have is we're just not quite there yet from a locality perspective. We have that one station that Rule, the Southeast Community Department, or Southeast Fire Department, that's so close by, and the fact that we are out a little bit further from the fire stations that are there still leaves me a little bit of unsure of being able to get that to us as quickly as we possibly. Hopefully, we never have to worry about fire, but again, that's one of the things that has my concerns. I think as we look further down the road, and again, we've talked about this, that with a station there at 84th and Layton, that brings that fire and rescue closer to home to us, where we're going to have that full 24/7 support from Lincoln Fire and Rescue, so we'll be able to have that. So what I'm requesting, and I think myself and my wife are requesting at this point in time, is the fact that, and I think it's already been stated, I think we feel that's pretty much going to happen, that annexation occurs. We are looking to have this stayed off just a little bit for some of the other reasons that have been stated. Once we get that station closer by, we will feel a little bit more comfortable that we have that support, that that if a fire would happen to happen, that we would have that that support. So, and again, I wanted to thank you so much for this, for the time. And again, I also wanted to point out real quick for the Assistant Chief, my neighbor Dan Howe, who was also represented earlier, we went down and visited with the Assistant Chief, and he gave us all the time for us to be able to ask questions, answer questions, for us to be able to feel comfortable with the type of requests that we're having. So again, I just wanted to throw some kudos out to him. Any questions?
Questions, Tom?
Thank you very much for your testimony. I surely appreciate it. So your concern, if I'm hearing you correctly, is a response time from a Lincoln fire station not being adequate today, not necessarily a lack of water lines and fire hydrants to serve the area. Is that, which I think I've heard from a couple of testifiers today, that really the concern is the location of the fire station? Is that correct?
I think that's my concern, well, of course, we all have concerns. I mean, I think my greatest concern, again, when we met with the Assistant Fire Chief, he told us how the engines work and that they carry water, and that, again, it was a very educational day for us to be able to understand how they want to control fires. If they can get into a building and get into an enclosed area where that fire is, they can basically put the fire out fairly quickly with the water that's carried and with the hoses that they have. That's on the engine itself. So again, that's nice. But I think our concern is the fact that is the distances there and the probabilities, because looking at some of the numbers that were out there in the annual report for 2016 that's out there for public view, we can actually go down and pull that out. When we take a look and see, some of those numbers are actually below some of the thresholds that were established, what they're trying to achieve. I think those thresholds are great areas to be able to get to, but it looks like we're not quite there in some of those as far as being able to get there with the number of manpower that it takes to be able to fight these fires. It was at like 59.1%. The minimum was supposed to be 70%, and their goal is to be at 90%. So again, with the fact that we have, and it's pretty much stated, I think the Assistant Chief mentioned that we need to have some more stations. We're going to relocate a couple of stations, plus bring on 2 new stations. The one there at Layton and 84th would be ideal for us. It brings the close proximity of that station close to us to be able to get there much quicker and be able to do that. Right now, I think the closest, it was mentioned earlier, we're at 2.7 miles is where the closest station is. And again, when you look at the probability of which engines are going to be available during during a 24-hour period, and again, it just doesn't. Again, I think more engines, the additional stations than that is going to make us feel a little bit more comfortable.
Thank you very much. It does. Okay. Thank you.
Dean?
My same 2 questions. Were you aware that you would be possibly annexed at some point when you bought your property?
To be honest with you, no. When we moved here, we were so focused on family. We saw where our location was. It really looked good. I didn't even ask that question as far as being annexed. I did ask the question about what is our fire? How, if we do have an emergency, where is that emergency going to be attended from? And then when we found out we had the Southeast Fire Department so close by, that eased a little bit of that for me right there.
Okay. And so if we were to bring this back in 2 years and the fire station was there, you would not oppose the annexation?
Again, going back to the question, I think that other people, I think we feel like annexation is going to be there. I understand the whole infrastructure piece and the what we get as far as being so close to the city, but I would be much more in favor of it in 2 years. Once we see that station and it's fully staffed, then I think that eases a little bit of our concerns. So.
Thank you.
And I guess I'll just ask too, just because I'm going to ask everyone that I can. Do you happen to know the average response time from the Southeast Rural Fire
Again, we've been here
Department?
20 months, and I haven't asked that question yet, so I don't know. I mean, we're fortunate enough that we haven't had the need for that type of response yet. So,
thank you.
Anything else? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We're all going to run. Good afternoon. I'm Janet Chung. I live at 9501 Eastview Road, and I'm here on behalf of the Sunrise Estates Community Association. I emailed a letter on behalf of our association, and you should have that in your packets. It was signed by all 28 homeowners in our association, and I think there are several of them here. I don't know if you want to raise your hands, but this has been a big topic. They're my cheering peanut gallery. But this has been a big concern for us. So I could read the letter to you, but I'm assuming that most of you read the letter. And so our concern really is about the fact that we don't have fire hydrants and the lack of water for LFR in responding to fires, whether it's structure fires, whether it's a barn, a house, a grass fire. We all have acreages anywhere between 3 and 5 acres. We also have an 11-acre what we call our horse-born property, which has hay. So if there is a large fire, LFR, as they have mentioned, there are no hydrants in our community. They carry, I think it's, did you say 500 gallons of water on each engine? And 500 gallons, I think someone said 4 seconds worth of, anyway, it's 500 gallons is not sufficient for a large house structure. We also had attached to the letter some of the articles that we came across when we were researching what LFR has done in other areas as far as house fires. So it was already mentioned by somebody that there was a Sky Ranch Acres fire and the house was destroyed. That was on a smaller property. As I mentioned, we have 3 to 5 acres. And if you look at the article that I attached, it said 80 firefighters showed up. And at that time, 9 fire engines would be required to relay or daisy chain from a fire hydrant to the house. As some of you mentioned, Dan Howe had sent a letter, and he is one of the property owners that we kind of quoted and used his address in our association letter. He is one of the houses that's furthest away from a hydrant, and we were guessing that he would need 3 fire engines because they now have more hose on their engines to daisy chain to get water to his house, maybe 4 engines, if those engines are available. If they're not already out on calls at another fire or another medical rescue, he would need at least 3 to daisy chain to the nearest hydrant. So, and then we also, Mr. Howe and Mr. Hinna, or not Mr. Hinna, Wolfram, they went down and visited with Assistant Chief Bohr, and one of them found the information online, or maybe they both did. I've been very busy gathering information from all my neighbors, but they gathered information about the annual report, and I cited 2 of the goals that are not being met by LFR. And as you've probably seen in the media, the City Council has been asked to add more firefighters, and as has been discussed, they're looking at relocating stations and building more stations. So we, at this point, request that you delay annexation. The Homeowners Association requests that you delay annexation until the fire stations are built and fully manned, so that you can, before you continue to add more houses and property for protection. And I can keep talking. But that kind of summarizes the letter. And I can show you the attachments, but you should have received the attachments in your packet, so.
Ready for questions? Dean?
How many fire engines or trucks does the Southeast Fire Department have?
They have 2 engines and a tanker at the station that's at 84th and Holdridge, and that's less than a mile from our neighborhood. So the tanker holds 5,000 gallons. They also said that they could bring up from the south station. They have 2 tankers down there, which holds 3,000 gallons, and the other one holds 1,500 gallons. And that's about 6.9 miles from us. So if you're looking at the 2 minutes a mile that Chief Borer said, that's about 13, 14 minutes.
And you mentioned that, you were concerned if the closest station was out on a call that it would be farther. Have you ever had a situation where both engines have been gone at the Southeast Rural Fire Department?
No, we've had really good response from the Southeast Rural District for calls in our neighborhood. And actually, we had a medical call the first month that I was living in our house, so it's...
But have you ever had a situation where both engines were gone at the same time?
From the Southeast District? I don't know. We'd have to ask them.
All right. And when you bought your property, did you know you could be annexed?
We thought we would someday be annexed, but every year our board, when we meet, would call and ask. And the last time we called was actually in, I think it was August or late July this year, because we usually have our annual meeting with all the homeowners in September. And we were told, no, there's nothing has been changed. And the person reported back to us, no, they said it's still the same status as before. And then we got letters, all of the homeowners got letters that they were considering our neighborhood for annexation the following week after he had made that call.
Okay. And the final question, just like I've asked everyone else, 2 years, if the station's up, would you be willing?
As long as there was a fire station up and it was fully staffed. And I didn't mention this other article, but there was another article that we found that said that the city had a grant available to add staff for fire suppression vehicles. It ran on the Journal-Star August 29th, and it said the city council did not take that grant. It was not approved. And it says to meet the national goal, the city would have to hire an additional 30 firefighters. And that was quoting the fire chief. So we'd like to see LFR staffed and ready to go for the city, and then we'd be happy to be annexed and add to their load that they currently have.
Thank you.
Tom.
Hi, Janet.
Hi, Tom.
Thanks for coming down and testifying today. We surely appreciate it. I was interested to hear that your homeowners association has a discussion about annexation, I guess, at least on an annual basis. Has that discussion ever, has your homeowners association discussed the possibility of adding improvements should annexation occur at all? Has that been a topic of discussion with the homeowners association?
It's been a large concern, because when you're looking at the frontage on a 3 to 5 acre property, that's a lot of cost if we were to add, because it's based on the footage along the property, and it does not. Evidently, Mr. Hinna has emailed Andrew several times and asked for some costs and been given an average, but we've not, we were told that they can't really give us the cost until someone requests it and it's in the workings. And they mentioned it's a city council public hearing thing on the assessment district. So it sounds like you pretty much have to say yes to it, and it has to be kind of along, and then you just pay whatever it is.
But for example, there's not been a conversation necessarily with the homeowners association and say a private engineer that could maybe work up a cost estimate or give you guys a rough estimate.
We have not
Okay.
hired an engineer to do that.
Okay.
I guess that is something we could consider, but we are a little reluctant to spend a lot of money on something that may not have the return and may cost us quite a bit of money.
Sure. So going off of Dean's question, generally speaking, you think that with the addition of the new fire station, that annexation is something that might be more digestible?
It would be more digestible. We also have a concern. I mentioned the 11-acre horse barn property. We're not sure how the infrastructure would, what we would do with that, because we would have to, if we were to ever sell that off, and we don't know how we would pay for improvements on that property, because 11 acres is a lot of land for us to pay for infrastructure on that. So we haven't really had that discussion recently. Back in 2008, I think, is when the last time it looked like we were going to be annexed. But that was 9-10 years ago almost. So there was a lot of active discussion, and we thought we were in the 2020 around that time frame. So we really weren't actively talking about a lot of the details until we got the letters, and then it was kind of like, holy cow. So yeah.
Okay. And then do you happen to have any ideas to the response time from the Southeast Rural Fire Department?
I haven't asked, so.
Okay, thank you.
And so you're saying the homeowners association owns that property, the
11 acres?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
It used to be, used for, well, we call it horse barn because there's a structure on it, and people could keep their horses down there because a lot.
Down here in the south
yes, it's
corner?
in the south corner.
Okay.
Yes.
Looks like it's larger than the other area.
Yes.
Got it. Okay.
Maya?
So we've heard from Chief Boer, as well as it was referenced in the article about the fire, that LFR has the ability to request assistance from rural fire departments. So does that alleviate your fears in any way, given that you're in a very, right now at least, in a very beneficial position to receive that extra assistance?
Well, we know that LFR works with Southeast Rural on mutual aid, and obviously the Sky Ranch Acres talks about how they called in Waverly as well as Southeast Rural. I mean, it helps, but again, as you've seen in some of the articles, LFR has a lot to take care of within the city, and we don't have any fire hydrants. So even if they are out there on site, they won't actually have the water, or what little water they have will be used very quickly. So if it gets out of control, which is what happened at the Sky Ranch Acres house, pretty much the house is just, once it starts spreading, time is of the essence when you have a structure fire.
But on that along that same line of thinking, water is also limited with a rural fire.
Well, the rural district brings a tanker.
Yes, but that is, as we've heard, that is also a limited
right.
amount of water. So in the sense, the only way to get the maximum amount of water would be to have city water and fire hydrants.
I suppose, I guess I haven't asked if they've ever used all the tankers and, had to call LFR for backup. I guess that's a good question for me to ask at a Southeast Fire District meeting.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Sandy? Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Philip Steffen, live at 9201 East Avon Lane, and I have a letter I thought I would read today, and I'm just going to kind of almost regurgitate all the same information. But I feel it's important to come down here and express my concern. But the letter regarding the proposed annexation of our property on 92-1 East Avon Lane and the annexation of all 28 homeowners in the Sunrise Estates Community Association. We as an association are located close to the city limits of Lincoln. We've always relied on our county services and maintained our own properties and neighborhood for the safety of all our homeowners. I understand future consideration for annexation into the city of Lincoln may be inevitable. At our last inquiry, a timeline showed 2020 to be the next timeline for our neighborhood to be studied for annexation. Recently, we received a letter in the mail stating our properties are being studied for a 2018 annexation. Considering our location and lack of infrastructure, mainly water supply and fire hydrants, the response time for emergencies in our area greatly increases and puts our neighborhood safety at risk. I looked up some information I'd like to share with you also. In Source Prime 6250 report, it states that LFR is currently experiencing resource distribution problems as evidenced by failure to meet first due travel time benchmark goal, and two potential factors being a lack of adequately distributed fire stations to cover the city, not enough stations for the geographical area covered, and number two, apparatus reliability and availability. By LFR's own optimization study in 2016 for emergency service goals, not less than 70%. First unit arrival total response time for fires was at 71.1. Effective response force of 16 to 19 firefighters at a fire. And I think our area, considering our acreages and if we needed multiple trucks would probably be 16 to 19 firefighters, was at 59.1%. And first unit arrival for total response time for EMS was at 54.6%. The data shows response times which are steadily declining over time, primarily due to the geographic expansion of the city without additional fire stations to cover the new areas. Also on the LFR's own optimization study, 2016 stated the relocation of 3 stations and addition of 2 new stations will greatly improve these indicators over the next 36 months. And that's in the next 3 years. It is a great concern of safety for my family and I regarding the Lincoln City Emergency Services. I asked you, the Planning Commission, to delay annexation until safety concerns have been met. Annexing us into the city, you're putting residents at unnecessary risk. In addition, Lincoln Journal-Star, August 21st, 2017 states that Lincoln Mayor Chris Beitler budget proposal includes hiring additional police officers and buying fire engines. I believe delaying annexation would greatly benefit Lincoln City services by allowing more time for the city to build the necessary fire stations and buy more fire engines to service Lincoln residents. Until adequate services and safety needs are addressed, the Planning Commission and City Council should consider delaying annexation until we can all be properly protected by city services. And just to answer some questions that are already going to be asked, I don't know the rural response time for Southeast Rural District, and for the 2 years, I would be more in favor of it. In 2 years for that fire station, it would make me feel better.
Yeah, and I'm using 2 years sort of as an arbitrary.
Sure, right, and that's I got 3 years.
I'm not
here,
holding the
right.
assistant chief's feet to the fire, but
sure. Yeah.
And did you know that there was a possibility of annexation?
Right, we've lived at our location almost 7 years, and we talk about it every year at our meetings about annexation and what that means. And if someone went down to talk to the city, and it was always reported back with the mid-20s, like 2024, but I think recently it was more 2020. So when we got the letter in the mail, it was kind of a big surprise to everybody. Oh, geez, I thought we had a few more years to until we were annexed in.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks for beating me to the punch. I appreciate it. You stated a few times that you were desiring to delay annexation until adequate safety concerns have been addressed or met. In your mind, what are specifically the adequate safety concerns that you want to have met before annexation should occur?
Right. When Ted Wolferman was up here, he talked about in Houston when he was being annexed into the city, the infrastructure was put into place with the water lines and the hydrants. And I don't know if the city of Lincoln can do that before we get annexed in, and then we could pay for those services over the 20-year time. That would make me feel a lot more comfortable. And, you know, I'm a family of, I have 5 kids at home, and, you know, safety is primarily my concern. And when we talk about annex into the city and the location of the fire stations and the lack of the water supply, God forbid there was ever be a fire in anybody's house, but especially, you know, if there's children involved, quicker time would be better for me. And if that water's right outside to put out a fire, I would feel a lot more better about that.
Sure.
But I mean, that was my main concern, the infrastructure and response time and stuff like that.
Thank you. I certainly appreciate it.
Okay.
Might be a good time to start having those discussions.
Right.
Other questions?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time.
Other testimony in opposition?
My name is Norm Harley, and I'm a resident at Sunrise Estates at 9400 Avon Lane. And I think I mailed this letter to you, so I don't want to read it, but I've got a few comments. One comment in particular with the supply of the water. I was an EMT and a firefighter for 35 years in a rural setting in northern Nebraska. And so I'm well aware of the ramifications that you have when you fight a grass fire. And I guess, you know, Assistant Chief, thank you for your service. I really appreciate that. I would feel more comfortable. I think basically we're not arguing annexation. I think it's going to happen. But I think we're getting the cart before the horse. And I really would like to see more infrastructure than I see right now. I would like to see a new fire hall closer to our vicinity. Also, I would like to see proper training. I don't know if you could tell, well, first of all, we talk about daisy chain. Have you ever figured up the minutes that it would take to daisy chain like 3 rigs together?
We did last year.
Okay, and the time on that?
Can you just provide your testimony, and then we'll ask questions.
Okay, all right.
Directly.
So that would be one question I would like to have answered. Another question would be the location of a new fire hall. I think that would be great. But then in addition to that, I think they should have something structured to where they could accommodate any situation out there that we would have. What do you mean? Mutual aid is a fine situation for like a mass casualty thing, but as far as accommodating the deficiency of a fire department, I don't think we should rely on that. If we have a major situation where they have to go out and ask for mutual aid, that's what it's for. But it's not for, oh guys, here's a grass fire, so we'll mutual aid with Southeast. I don't think that's the purpose of the mutual aid. In addition to Southeast, I asked the chief there, how many square miles did they service? And he said at one time we were 50 square miles, we're down to 25 square miles. So my question would be, if they are down that much, where is this going to stop? And at what point will it be to where they cannot offer any assistance of any kind? If they're losing that much tax base, at what point then will they lose whatever they have? And then as far as equity, I think you alluded to that. We moved out there 6.5 years ago, and we might have on that county road that's oiled, we might have maybe a dozen cars that would go through there. A lot of people would say, I didn't even realize it was out here. Now, because of Waterford, they know how to get out of there, and they're using our county road, which is fine. But I would say that probably would have 200 to 300 vehicles past our house in a day's time. So as far as equity, it works both ways. So I think that's basically the long and short of it. So.
Questions?
Thank you very much for coming down and testifying today. I appreciate it.
Okay.
the question that you asked the assistant chief, I will ask of him later. Do you happen to know the response time for the Southeast Rural Fire Department?
I do not know for Southeast, no.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name's Dave Halverson. My wife and I, Joyce, live at 1440 Linwood Lane, which is right on the corner of Linwood and Holdridge. We've been residents in that house twice, so we've got about 13 years of experience out there. I have kind of a different take on this than the rest of our friends do out there. One thing I think is a huge item for you to look at is we have 100% of our subdivision does not want to be annexed. It's not 99 or 85, it's 100% of us don't want it. You've heard a lot of the same comments today. I'm not going to repeat that. I agree with all of those. Some of my comments are, right now our mill levy is about 1.8. If we get pulled into the city, and I will say I don't think there's any advantage for us to be in the city, we go to 2.01. So we're going to, after our 33% evaluation increase last year, which adds $250 a month to our taxes, we're going to add another $200 a month to our taxes out there. Then if we have to put water and sewer in, the estimates I've heard is $40 a foot for water and sewer. So $80 a foot across the front of our property is $25,000. And the combination of that means we put up a for sale sign. That puts it out of the realm of being able to afford to live there. And I guess that's our problem, but I have to think some of my other neighbors face the same thing. And for there to be any gain in us being in the city, we need to have the water line in there so the fire department is as effective as they can be. And again, they are an excellent fire department. I don't think anybody has stated anything other than that. But the time frame to hook the 3 trucks up, I have to think is at least several minutes. And if you add that to the response time, I drive from Linwood and Holdridge down by the fire station that's going to respond to us every day, and I realize they can force their way through, and I can't, but it's not a 5-minute drive. So I don't see that response time is going to be there. And as far as the equity, we've had Waterford Estate construction and people driving through our neighborhoods forever too. It's not that we get use out of city services. They're getting use out of the streets in front of us, and our streets were not built by the county. Our streets were built by the developer out there. And the next thing is the water and sewer thing. Nobody's mentioned, but we've already paid $12,000 to $14,000 to have our water and sewer there. So now we're not only going to be asked to spend $25,000 just to get in front of the house. In our house, you would have to come back from the back of the house, go around the side, and down through about 300 feet to get out to the street in front if the sewer line's on our side. So we're going to destroy 1/4 of our entire yard of 4 acres to do that. Water line goes basically the same path, so it would be somewhat shorter than that. But if we do that, then we also have to have our wells taken out of service. We have to have somebody come and officially take those out of service because they're all registered wells. We have to dig up our septic systems. I would say if we got by for $4,000 or $5,000 on that, we'd be lucky. So if you add up the taxes, the water and the sewer, and then removing what we have, we're all looking at a huge chunk of money. And I think what's going to be the end result of this, if this happens, is it's going to lower our actual property values. I've been a realtor for 23 years, and you start piling costs on top of a property. It's just like flood insurance. The house just goes down the same amount that the payment would be to cover flood insurance. If you're going to have to pay a $3,000 a year bill for water and sewer line, people are going to go, well, divide that by 12, and we got $250 a month, so that house is worth $25,000 less than it was yesterday because we've got this other attached bill. So I'd really appreciate it if you would think about those costs, think about how they would affect you at your house if all of a sudden you got a bill for $30,000 to change your water and sewer that you've already got, and it works fine. And I've been happy. The response time, we have a little experience. We've had 2 emergency calls at our house, and it was between 12 and 14 minutes on both of them for rural. And actually, this was before LFR was doing ambulances. So it was the other ambulance service. LFR, or rural, beat the city ambulances to our house. So I think that kind of speaks for, and I think that ambulance came off of about 48th and Vine, I believe. It took longer, so. Anyway, any questions?
Questions?
So you're just against annexation in general?
Well, I hate to be quite that harsh about it, but I really think that if we're going to do this, I think the fire station needs to be there and operating, and I think they have every intention of that's going to happen no matter if we're annexed or not, but I think that's an essential, and I just don't see the city brings us anything. To me, it's more like they're getting a lot of tax dollars away from Waverly School District to pay for their schools and charging us for two different districts. I think that should be against the law. That is not right to make us pay what was for Waverly. And we know that there's 4 new schools coming to Lincoln in very short order. And they're going to then, so we're paying for 2 districts and we can only use 1. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in opposition? Yes, come forward.
My name's Leo Kreifels. I'm really not in this area. I live in 341 Anthony Lane, which is the Hillcrest neighborhood. And the only reason I'm here, I didn't plan on coming here to speak, but I have a couple of questions that I didn't hear these folks ask. I know they're in the Waverly district. And we just reestablished our homeowners association so we could kind of get together and kind of look and see what the rest of the neighborhoods, this one here in particular has the Waverly district, what they're asking. And one of the questions I didn't hear was there coordination with the Waverly district? Because one of the property owners that live in my neighborhood, she works at the Waverly School, and said that they were not aware of anything that was going to happen as far as annexation with our neighborhood. So how does that affect their district? And did anybody coordinate with them to let them know that, that neighborhood was going to be annexed into the LPS district? One of the other things that we have, of course, is the school bus does come through our neighborhood, picks up all the kids, takes them to Waverly, and after we're annexed, then those kids will no longer get the bus service, from what I heard from this lady. And so she said they could probably still go to the Waverly district, but they'd have to get to the school themselves, which is another burden on the parents that have to have those kids taken to the school by themselves. So I don't have any answers, I just have a few questions, and that's something that I didn't hear from these folks, and I thought maybe that should be brought up, because you're going to hear it from ours when our folks come on the 25th. So that's all I have.
Questions? I think we can ask those questions. Anyone else?
My name's Dennis Schutte, and I live at 9401 Avon Lane. And the fire protection is questionable for me. I'm 1,200 foot away from a fire hydrant. That is 2 trucks. And yes, LFR has a very good fire system. They're having trouble meeting their timeline now and putting 2 trucks to relay the water. That's going to add to their timeline, and he could not give a time of what it took. I do know that a 5-inch hose is 1 gallon a minute or 1 gallon a foot to fill that hose. So that's 1,200 gallons they're going to run through that hydrant to reach my house, and I believe the hydrants are around 500 gallons per minute on the red hydrants. We've got a couple minutes right there to get the water in to fill the hose, plus the extra time of finding the closest hydrant. And I do not believe we are going to get adequate fire protection. I was told at the informational meeting that LFR could go up to 2,000 feet, and there's a couple of houses that are past that 2,000 feet, and the probability of being three of the closest places, fire apparatus being available at one time is pretty iffy. And that's what I have to say about that. Our streets, I believe the city street department is 4 inches. The county is 2 inches. They also spread gravel at the bottom of the hill from us because it's a downhill onto Linwood off of Avon, which is a real good safety thing. They spread gravel at Linwood and Holdridge for safety. Has that stopped a bodily injury or property damage accident? We don't know until we're annexed, and the city street department's not going to do it. We're not an arterial street, so we're not going to get the services. The school system, I am going to mention that. That is in my letter. Our area high school that we would be attending is East High. East High is one of the best rated schools in the city of Lincoln. Looking at the ratings, number one, we will not get bus service. And we do get bus service to Waverly. Waverly will not come into our area once we're annexed to pick up our students. It is pretty much guaranteed that we can opt to have our students finish in Waverly at least this school year if we are annexed at the first of the year. But we have to get them to either the nearest place the bus is going to pick up at or to school. Taking more tax dollars out of Waverly schools, they are already running an awful thin budget. And now they're going to be running thinner because I also heard that they had no knowledge of this happening anytime soon. And the Waverly schools rates higher in English and a little below in math. And Waverly Schools has 500 students versus 1,500 students, which lets we'll have one graduating this year, we'll have one that is a junior next year, one that will be a freshman next year. It's going to give those students and the other people in the area, their children, a lot better chance in a smaller school district of being a part of team projects and things like that. There's not as many activities in Waverly, but if you would take the percentage of students being on teams, it's quite a bit higher. And like at this point, I think, have I lived there for quite a while? Yes. Was I aware that there would be future annexation? Yes. And if I felt safe and thought things were in place to annex. And as far as the fire station being in place on Layton, or like this morning the paper said Holdridge, we don't even have the ground. At least they've got the grounds down south and they're saying 2 years. What about, do you have the ground yet? Okay. And it might take another year or two to get the ground, and then, but I would feel if they built that fire station and they had the equipment there, I think also if we're going to annex these areas out that have no hydrants, we need to have those stations on the outskirts equipped for acreages. My shop, which has, boat, Model Ts, things like that in it, they cannot, their fire trucks won't even go to it because it is down quite a ways away. And if they come out and monitor the fire and then call in mutual aid, that's a long time.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Questions? No? Okay. Other testimony in opposition? Okay, I see none. Questions for staff?
So if I may, as the applicant, the city wishes to address some of the comments and questions during rebuttal at this time.
I think that's fine.
I have questions. Can we do that? Can we do that after rebuttal, or?
I think questions will be after.
Yeah.
Okay. Just don't want to miss my chance.
You will have.
There will be many.
Do you want to take a 5-minute break?
Yes.
That would be great if we
Let's
could.
take a 5-minute break. Hold your thought, okay?
I'll hold it. No, I'm going to go.
5 minutes, guys. Okay, I think we're ready to start again. We'll continue with applicant rebuttal and then questions. We'll just kind of do all that at once.
Okay, Paul Barnes with the Planning Department again. I think we will acknowledge some of the comments and things that have been brought up during testimony by the property owners. The first thing I wanted to do is bring us back to our annexation policy, again rooted in state statute, embodied in our comprehensive plan for the city and county. And talking about these points, these are the reasons why we've brought these areas before you. It's the equity for all taxpayers, not just for certain ones, but for everyone. Clarifying service areas, both for emergency services and fire, and also road maintenance. And then also the orderly and efficient growth piece of that. Again, looking at the methodology, which of these criteria does this area meet? Well, it meets several of them. It is located in Tier 1, Priority B. Check off the first one. Is it engulfed by city limits? No, not completely. It is contiguous to the city limits on 3 sides. It is also in a location that has basic infrastructure brought up to the subdivision. Andrew has pointed that out. The water and sewer are stubbed up to this area and ready for a locally initiated assessment district to bring that throughout the area. And also, it is an urban character. Urban character is not solely based on use. It's also based on location and proximity to urban development. This area, by definition, is urban in character. Sounds like the comments are somewhat separated into 2 topics, and I think we're going to let some of other experts address those, which I think we see as fire and emergency response, and then also some questions about utilities. Before we do that, though, I would just want to make a comment about this limitation of water. I think that our assistant fire chief has demonstrated very well that that is a non-issue, and that they do have the capability today, even without relocation of fire stations, that they can provide that service with the adjacent fire hydrants to this subdivision. As far as the location of fire stations, this area actually is served pretty well if we consider the location of stations throughout the community. Through the process of their capital projects and building new stations, they're going to address that, but we do have Station 12, Station 9 here that would serve this area and currently does serve land further to the east, which is Waterford Estates. And that's in the city, and that is developing actively, successful development. I don't want to get into too much more of Assistant Chief's material. I will say, though, that I believe that they have provided good data in their reports, and that it's been questionable data coming from response time from Southeast Rural Fire, and I think that's a good distinction to make. In terms of the utilities items, we do have Bob Simmering from Public Works and Utilities who can help us walk through some of the assessment district questions and items of cost if we get specific to that. But as Andrew and I have said, the assessment district process is separate, and you cannot request that until you are annexed and part of the city limits, within the city limits. The basic infrastructure is there and is a logical extension to provide service into this area, but that would be a request of the property owners. The city would not do a design for these local lines and pay for that. I think that's something that they could consider and take upon themselves. There was a comment about, I guess I'll use this map, this area to the north and a matter of equity, and if they're in such close proximity, then why aren't they being annexed? I think there's two answers to that question. One is the utilities topic that Andrew had stated. With this package of 8 sub-areas, we wanted to bring forth a more clear-cut, obvious set of proposals for the Planning Commission to consider and the City Council to consider. There are questions as to how those lines would be laid, different easements, there's not public right-of-way up there for them, plus the issue of a ridge line and drainage, so it's a little more complicated. The second answer to that comment is that we will continue doing annexation studies, and the next package will get into that level of detail, not only in this area to the north, but there's others like this that we did not include in this package because they do have and require a little more thought and analysis. And then lastly, and I'll let Andrew fill in anything else that I've forgotten, there were some comments about the Waverly School District and that they may or may not have been contacted or involved with this process. And, you know, we all did attend the all of the neighborhood meetings, including the Hillcrest neighborhood meeting, and I did have a conversation with an individual who works for Waverly. And after that conversation, we had sent an email directly to the new superintendent of Waverly School District, as well as, I believe the title is Business Manager, Mr. Robin Hoffman, and offered up all of this information, sent them specifics on both this site and also Hillcrest because they're both in Waverly. Once we did put our applications in and they became a formal request, they were sent, like any other reviewer or notification, they were sent through our application review system, a notice of that, which was an attachment in your packet. So there have been more than one attempt to reach out to them and have conversations. I think the other thing, just to kind of note on that, is for years we've had in our comprehensive plan an established future service limit, which goes out to Stevens Creek to the east. That includes, you know, many, many acres of future development area within Tier 1 that we know can be served by city services up to the year 2040. I think a discussion with Waverly and possibly Lincoln Public Schools would be a good conversation to have, knowing that we work with both districts and that this is and has been the plan for Lincoln's growth for quite some time. Anything to add?
I don't think I have anything to add up front. Pat, would you like to add some more information? Sure.
I think that we all agree that in terms of emergency services, response time is important. The quicker you get there, the quicker you can act, and the quicker you can resolve the emergency. I think we all agree, everybody in the room agrees upon that. And I want to say that I think Southeast Rural Fire Department is a great department, but we have a distinct advantage. If you look at this chart right here, if you want to consider the race, we're going to start the race right here. When we get the notification when we're in the station of when the emergency is, where the emergency is, we're going to start right there. Where does the race start for Southeast Rural? I have no idea. They're not in the station. You can have a station right next door. You can have a station on every block. But if no one is in the station, it doesn't do any good. So our clock starts here. I don't know where their clock starts. Again, I think they're a great department. And then it goes on from there. One of the gentlemen talked about effective response force. If I might, if you allow me to, I'd like to expand upon that a little bit. An effective response force is a number of people needed to do all the tasks at a given job. And at a fire, we break it down into, there's a number of them, but there are three primary ones. Putting water on the fire, ventilating the structure, and searching for people who are trapped. 16 to 19 people. So you might have, if one person that lives close to the station, one person can take one engine or one vehicle or one something to the fire, but you've got to accumulate 16 to 19 people in order to have an effective response to that particular incident to do all the work that's necessary. And so no one knows the response time for Southeast Rural. I don't know it. Again, I think they do their very best, but we know exactly what ours is. And we don't, I admit, we do not meet our self-imposed goals. We haven't built a station in 22 years. We are changing that. And we have a process in place to change that moving forward. So I would say that the service today, with the stations we have today, is, unless there's some information about their response time, our response time is right there. Anybody can look at it, anybody can see it. We have a distinct advantage in that we live at the station. I'd say it's as good as Southeast Rural's. So with regards to the distance from any of our existing stations, if you look at the map in our report, there are parts of the city that are further away than other places of the city, and we provide adequate coverage. Again, it's not desirable. We want to improve upon it. But if you look at this map and you look at the stations down here in the south part of the city, there is, from Station 9 is on 66th and Vine, and it's about 20 blocks or so from the area that we're talking about. These areas are 2-3 miles from areas that we currently serve today and serve adequately. So I'd entertain any questions.
I think questions for any staff?
I have some for Chief here. How long, I know the question came up, how long does it take to do the daisy chaining if you have to do that?
I don't know. But let me describe it for you, and you can probably get a sense of how long it takes. So if we were going to do the complete 2100 and whatever 3 times 750 is, so 3 fire engines doing all of their hose, and it's 5-inch hose, and all the hydrants in this area are new hydrants with a minimum of 6-inch mains, which provides us with more water than we can use. So it's an adequate amount of water supply. So the first fire engine, knowing where they're going, stops at the closest hydrant, hooks to the hydrant, and drives and lays out all their hose. The next one doesn't stop anywhere until he gets to the hydrant, until he or she gets to the location of the engine that laid out all their hose. Person steps off, takes the hose, hooks it up to the engine that's stationed there, drives on until they run out of hose, and then the third one does it, and then you're done. It does take some time, but it doesn't take a lot of time.
It would be similar to having to hook up to a hydrant.
Very similar to hooking up a hydrant, you're just hooking it to the engine instead.
Now,
you're doing it 3 times.
I want to make sure that I heard you correctly. When LFR is dispatched, how many trucks do you send?
Today on a fire alarm, we send 3 engines and 2 trucks.
So, and those 3 engines are the ones that have the hose?
The engines are the ones that have the hose, yes, ma'am.
So they've already got the 3 engines going?
Yes.
Automatically?
All start at the same time, headed toward the address. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Welcome. Yes, Maya.
Is the information about the rural Southeast response time available to us? Can we get that information?
I don't know. It takes quite a bit of staff to put together these kinds of charts and data. I don't know that they have the staff. I don't know if they measure those things. I don't know. I don't know if it's available.
So it seems that we're basing this entire conversation on information that we don't have. I'm wondering is there something time sensitive about this, or would we, 2 things. Will we be able to delay this and get that information so that we can properly debate it? And secondly, is that imposing too big of a burden on the department?
Yeah, you could say so. I think that comes down to a question for Southeast Fire, and I don't know if anyone from their department is here or their district is here. Collecting data, I think, would be a process of over time. I think the report that Assistant Chief Bohr has presented is an annual report. It's a year's worth of data plus, over time. If we were to delay this, say 2 weeks, I don't think that we'd get much from that. I think that we do want to keep this application moving forward for the reason that there is a matter of timing for taxes and tax purposes. By building in, if this goes on to city council and if they adopt it, the city portion of taxes actually wouldn't be paid for by the property owners until 2019. The more we delay that, the more that gets pushed off, and then that built-in cushion changes.
David Carey with the Planning Department. I would add to the answering of that question. Staff and I feel that the information that we have presented is adequate for you to make a decision. I think the reason for that is that our own Lincoln Fire and Rescue Department has the data to support the ability to serve this area adequately. I don't think that that's in question. I think as the Assistant Chief has made those points, the staff has been making those points as well. So from a staff perspective, that is the point that I would make answering that question.
Okay, and then just a follow-up question. How does this particular annexation relate and compare to the other annexations that we have approved in terms of response time?
Well,
the interest of being fair and,
sure.
and treating everybody
right.
equitable, as we've stated as
right.
is the #1 priority.
I think that's a very fair question, and the answer, and I'll ask my colleagues to help out answering it as well. I think we just saw pointed out on the map that we have approved for about 10 years ago the Waterford Estates development to the east of this area, so further beyond than what the area that we're talking about annexation. So being right next door to what we're talking about has been developing and is living within the same exact service that we are talking about, this area that we're talking about annexation would experience. So as far as equity is concerned, we would be living within the same service amount that areas of existing city further than what we're talking about are already receiving. And
was Waterford developer initiated?
Yes.
So how does this particular annexation compare to the city-initiated annexations that we approved in our last meeting?
Yeah, and that's part of the information that we have talked about as part of this process. So there are two different ways to initiate annexations. A developer initiated would obviously be more defined around an area that's growing currently and coming in for an approval. Obviously, this is a city-initiated, and it is based on the existing policies that we have in place for doing that type of annexation.
I mean, only in terms of response time. For
review of those new areas that are developer initiated, part of the review process goes to LFR, and they do make comment on response time and ability to serve. And so there is a review process taken for that at that time, similar to what we would involve the Assistant Chief and his staff in this city-initiated package.
So is this area, in your opinion, at a disadvantage compared to the other areas that we have approved for annexation?
No, not at all. I think you have a great question. There's a developer developing land, many developers probably developing land in the area of 40th and Rokeby. And our closest location to there is 27th and Old Cheney. And I comment on those plan reviews come to my desk. And my comment essentially was, we support city growth, but we want all parties to understand that we cannot get to this location within our response time goal. So the distance from our current station to those developer-initiated annexation lands in around 40th and Rokeby are greater than this distance.
What about the city-initiated annexations that we talked about in the last meeting?
I would again say, if I don't remember all of them, but certainly 7th and Fletcher and others that I remember are closer than the developer-initiated annexations that are occurring around the city.
So
further than this one or farther than this?
I just reread all of those reports at break from the last meeting. Area B, 3 miles. Area G, 2 miles. Area H, 1 mile. Area F, 3 miles. All the 3 miles are slightly greater than what we're talking about right now.
Yeah, so if we look, we have the map on the screen. If we want to
Thanks, Sandra.
Yeah, I guess that's the real answer. But.
Had them before the meeting, and I didn't take the time to write it down, but yeah.
This one is 2.7, is that what I remember?
2.7.
So, maybe I misunderstood your question. I thought you were asking, when you got a developer-initiated development, like down here in this area here, look at the distance between the service area and then these. This is a greater distance than what the city is proposing in their annexations. That's what I thought your question would be answered.
No, I appreciate all of the answers.
So if you look here, I mean, here's the closest stations to this. Obviously, the one we looked at just before this, there's a station right next door. But one of them from last time, station's down there. No. This was, we looked at last time, the existing stations right there, that's a little closer. This is the golf course we looked at last time. The closest stations are pretty comparable to what we're looking at today.
Mm-hmm.
And then here, this last parcel we looked at last time, again, a similar distance to what we're looking at today.
Other questions?
I do have a couple more just in
Please.
general. So I just want to kind of reiterate here, just because they're annexed does not mean they have to join city water, city sewer. They do not have to expend that money.
Correct, yeah. As I showed earlier, that subdivision, that acreage subdivision from 1996 that was annexed, and they still don't have water or sewer. And really the discussion about water and sewer costs is something that would be for the Board of Equalization down the road if it's requested. Annexation.
That would be initiated by a property owner
Correct, yep,
if they so choose.
yep.
Can I ask a follow-up question to that before you go
I
to a
have one
different
on
one?
that, too.
And Bob might want to join. I don't know that you'll have to, but it'd be good to have all you guys up there to be foursome then. Is the basic infrastructure that's in place around this sub-area the same basic infrastructure that would be in place for any new development anywhere? Or is there anything missing?
Yeah, so imagine this is just an empty farm field, and
Right.
someone wants to come in and
Right.
redevelop it. They would have to build all of the water, sewer, streets inside of this.
So there's nothing lacking from what the city would provide for any development or any subdivision?
Correct.
Similar to this?
Yep, this would be the same situation as any new development
Okay.
in the city.
Sorry.
No, it's okay.
Just real quick, piggybacking on that also, it has to be annexed to provide those services. So for fire hydrants, you'd have to annex the property.
Correct, yeah. There's not really a scenario where the city pays for, say, fire hydrants through all the local streets before annexation. That's not how the city of Lincoln does things. So
Thank you.
it'd be
And-
annexed, and then they'd request it.
That was my question. That was one of my questions, because it sounded like each of the folks who came from Sunrise today in opposition said that they really felt like they should have more city services provided, that there should be a basis for increased taxation or annexation. And I wanted to know, in what situations or instances does the city of Lincoln provide city services prior to the ground being incorporated within the city?
We have a concurrency policy, which is that we won't do that until it's annexed. So I'm not aware of any circumstances like that.
Okay. And then...
But there is a partial subsidy available if they go that way.
Potentially, and that's something the Board of Equalization would work out. In the past, if there's been, say, there's a street and there's only houses on one side of the street, instead of making just that one side of the street pay for everything, the city may subsidize some of that cost to help offset the burden. But again, that would be up to the Board of Equalization.
So if that were the case along Holdridge, if fire hydrants were put on the south side of Holdridge along the Sunrise Estates, they would not be expected to pay for those lots that are also adjacent on Holdridge, north of Holdridge.
Well, I'm not sure if any more hydrants would be put in Holdridge. I mean, usually you have water on one side, sewer on the other side of the street. There's not water on both sides of a street, technically. So
Got it. All right,
yeah.
I see.
So there's already hydrants in Holdridge.
Okay.
And on these streets, there are property owners on both sides of these streets. So
Okay.
I don't know that the city would actually subsidize any of these particular ones.
And then earlier, one of the folks who testified in opposition seemed to raise an issue about who pays for the utility cost or the upfront cost in the assessments, whether or not the 20 years is, whether or not that initial upfront is paid for by the city or by the applicant, the group of applicants, the assessment district.
Yeah, and that's correct. It would be paid for by the city, but then the city would be paid back by the property owners.
Okay.
Tracy Core had more questions, I think.
Yeah. The gentleman that owns the big parcel on Holdridge, and he talked about they put in a, it sounded like kind of like a right-hand turn lane in there, but it's grass or along those lines. And he was talking about having to maintain that. Am I thinking properly that that's no different than a city property owner having to maintain the right-of-way between the street and the sidewalk or however far up it goes?
Yep, yeah, everyone, as you know, everyone in the city maintains their little strip of right-of-way between the sidewalk and the road. So this is that same situation. He just has more of it because he has a larger property.
Right, because he owns more land. Mm-hmm.
Okay, other questions over here? None? Do you have more?
I think that's it.
Okay, I don't think we have any other questions. I think we're ready for a motion then.
Move approval, Core.
Second, Beckius.
Discussion.
Annexation is never easy. No one usually likes it, and this is a hard decision, but I will support the annexation because of the criteria laid out and because Chief Boer's word is like gold to me, so I will support it.
I too am going to support this annexation, and primarily for equity issues with the folks who are paying taxes around this area, and also for consistency in decision making. Even though I wasn't always in favor, our body 2 weeks ago chose to approve 4 annexations, and for the primary reason that folks seem to be arguing today on fire and rescue, we have made decisions based upon what we believed were adequate fire and rescue presented by the department. And so I'm going to support the department, their testimony or their information, and maintain consistency with this body and vote in favor.
Tom?
I too will vote in favor. Thank you to everyone that came down to testify. I appreciate it very, very much. The only issue that I had in front of me was an issue of safety and whether or not we would be looking at a decreased level of service by Lincoln Fire and Rescue should this annexation took place. I'm not convinced that that is the case. I'm not convinced that we're looking at a lower level of service. I do think that the major tenets of our comprehensive plan illustrating what annexation should look like have been met in this case. I think that that has been known by the community for a period of time, that annexation was something that would eventually be considered and discussed. And I think it's important to keep this process moving forward and for that discussion to continue at the next level.
Chris?
I'm going to vote against the motion. I'm generally supportive of annexation, but I really do think this is a timing issue. I think that, as Maya pointed out, we don't know the fire issue, but you know, I think that in 2 years there will be a fire station there, hopefully, and at that point it would make sense. And I think that the supporters there, 100% of them don't support it now. I believe that they would in 2 years.
Thanks. Anybody over here? Maya?
I would, I'm going to support the motion as well. I asked about delaying just because I thought as a courtesy to the people who took time out here today have being able to actually compare response times would just be more transparent. But I'm sensing that I'd be asking or putting too big of a burden on a department, and we may just delay and come back with not conclusive information. So I will, for that reason, I will revert back to what I said in our last meeting, that we have to look at the specific annexation policy as it's laid out in the comprehensive plan, which we've all signed off on. And I think that this checks the boxes. It does not seem to be something that puts this area at a disadvantage in terms of response time overall, and we have to look at equity for the city as a whole, not just specific areas. I would say that of the arguments that planning has put forth, we tend to talk about the equity argument first. It's a really tricky one because equity is a perspective, and you know, we've talked about in this case it was the area north of this annexation area. Why are we not annexing that? That could, you know, there's an argument to be made that that's not equitable. There's also an argument to be made for the Waverly Public Schools District that that's not entirely equitable. So for me, I adhere more to the orderly growth argument. You know, we have to look at annexation in order to grow. We have to try and do it in the best way we can, and in the way that makes the most sense, considering where we can extend these city services. So for that reason, I will support the motion.
Anyone else? Yes, Kristen.
And I thank all of you for taking the time to come and testify and talk about your properties. And this is a real challenging and complex issue as we move forward each time. I will be in support of the motion, and I really appreciate our planning and growth methodology and what we look at as a city and the opportunities as a city that we give ourselves, and to be in this community as we travel around the United States, the growth we have here and the combining of all of the different areas such as Havelock and those have really given us a nice city of Lincoln to keep moving forward. And like you said, I concur with what you had said too. Thank you.
Is there anyone else?
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Tracy.
No, go ahead.
For me, some of this is not so much the location of the fire station as it's the location of the fire hydrant. And I think that this particular area has been kind of spoiled, if you want to, because they're so close to this Southeast Rural Fire Station already. So it appears that they're gonna have longer response times, and we don't know that for sure. But what we do know is that those hydrants are there, the trucks come out and they can hook up and they can reach all these properties and service them. But to me, it's also a little bit of which came first, the chicken or the egg. I mean, we can't wait to annex everything until they have fire hydrants or a fire station right by them. It's got to be some give and take. And as far as the equity is concerned, I mean, as someone that lives pretty much in the center of Lincoln, I'm probably farther away from a fire station than some of you guys, but you guys are driving on the same roads as I am every day probably, and you're not getting, you don't have to pay wheel tax. You don't have to pay some of the same taxes. I have to pay LPS taxes and I don't have any kids. So is that fair to me? No. But you know what? That's the way the world is. It's not fair. So I'm supporting it. I think that this is appropriate for annexation, and sometimes that's just the way the cookie crumbles. I didn't have any more fire-related ones.
I want to thank everyone who provided testimony. I know for sure that it helps every one of us come to our respective decisions. It really does, so thank you. I'm going to support the motion as well. I don't really have anything to add. I think that everyone's spoken about the merits of approving this motion. So, Jerry, would you please call the roll?
Yes, this is for approval of annexation 17016. Beckius?
Yes.
Edgerton?
Yes.
Finnegan?
Yes.
Harris?
Yes.
Hove?
No.
Joy?
Yes.
Washington?
Yes.
Core?
Yes.
Share.
Yes.
Motion carried 8-1. Okay, next item is item 4.3, Comprehensive Plan Conformance Number 17016, to review the proposed Lancaster County Road and Bridge Construction Program fiscal year 2018 and 2019 to 2023 as to conformance with the 2040 Lancaster County Comprehensive Plan. Staff recommendation is conformance with the comprehensive plan. Are there any ex parte communications to be disclosed on this agenda item?
I see none.
Okay, Paul Barnes with the Planning Department. I'm just going to provide an introduction to this item, and we have our county engineer, Pam Dingman, here to get into some details for you. Basically, what we have before you is a comprehensive plan conformance application. In the 1950s, the County Board of Commissioners had passed a resolution that required the road and bridge project for the county to come before the City County Planning Commission for a review of conformity with our comprehensive plan. So this is the fiscal years 2018 and then 2019 to 2023 Lancaster County Road and Bridge Construction Program. So our staff in the planning department have done a review of these projects, specifically with the project listing and descriptions in Chapter 10 of our comprehensive plan. And through that review, we have determined that the program moving forward is in conformance with the comprehensive plan. I'll turn it over to Ms. Dingman.
Thank you. And can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, good. I want to talk about first for just a couple of minutes, and I promise that I won't use 2 hours of your time this afternoon or 2 additional hours, but hopefully somewhat less than maybe 15 or 20 minutes. I want to talk to you a little bit about the current conditions of our roads and bridges. Bridge conditions. We currently have 28 bridges that are structurally deficient, 35 that are scour critical or scour susceptible, 9 that are currently closed. We also had the sad discovery this last year of what I call combo structures. We have 83 of those. So combination structures are kind of this weird thing where maybe we had a small bridge and we stuck a box culvert on either end of it. Usually in the 60s, or maybe we had a box culvert and we stuck a pipe on it, or any sort of that sort of activity. We know as engineers that that's really not a good idea, but nevertheless, we have 83 of those structures in the county. We have 6,900 pipe culverts and 1,000 box culverts. Our current structural needs for those culverts and bridges is about $51 million. On roadway, we have 79 miles of asphalt that need to be overlaid according to standard maintenance requirements, and 28 miles of needed new pavement according to traffic counts and other public needs. In addition to that, we know that we have 4 subdivisions that need to be overlaid in either asphalt, with asphalt. That being said, the county has been taking over the maintenance of subdivisions for about 20 years. We have 38 miles of gravel subdivisions and 35 miles of paved subdivisions, but unfortunately, there was never a plan for maintenance of these subdivisions once they were taken over. Roadway needs total about $50 million. With our current funding, which this year for construction will be $8.7 million. It will take us over 12 years to meet those needs. I'd like to start, maybe I should have started here, because I know we do have some new planning board members, and I guess no one asked me to identify myself. You guys let me slip through today. I am Pam Dingman, the Lancaster County engineer. You're welcome to contact me at this phone number or this email about any road or bridge concerns you have. We also do review the subdivisions contained within Lancaster County and make a recommendation to the planning board. A little note about some of the projects we completed in 2017. I do have a map of it. I'm just going to kind of quickly go through the list. And I should say completed or will complete, and I'm going to say a little prayer that we really don't get snow as early as it feels like we might get this year. We're hoping to complete Adams Street from approximately 103rd to 148th. We completed various overlay projects that can be seen on the map that I just showed to you quickly. In addition, we completed bridge maintenance at H66, D88, and H120. H66 is on 112th Street. It's just a little bit south of Elvo. Unfortunately, we had to work on that bridge last year too, and so this is just a little bit follow-up project. D88 is on Agnew Road. It's just a little bit east of Highway 79. And this is kind of an interesting bridge. It was given to us by the Defense Department in the 1950s. It was built very sturdily to convey the missiles to the missile silos. And so it was very, very badly damaged in the flood of 2015. We built a wall and shored this thing up, and unfortunately the problem just kind of moved a little more upstream, and so we're going to have to shore it up again. And then lastly, H120, which is a bridge that we bought at auction in 1932 from the state of Nebraska when they considered it obsolete for traffic. We installed in the Emerald area. When it no longer met requirements there, we moved it to the Waverly area. We have spent a lot of money trying to stabilize this bridge. Unfortunately, I have told the adjacent residents that this is the last fix, and in the future I will close this bridge and we will not be able to replace it. Then we have what's kind of old is new again. We talked about that this process came about in the 1950s. So in the 1950s, the county engineer really embarked off on a dramatic plan to reduce the number of bridges we had in Lancaster County. We had well over 700 bridges at the time. He began converting them into box culverts. So hey, guess what we did this last year? We are in the process of converting Bridge G111, which is kind of it's the little brother bridge to the Elvo Bridge, H66. It's located on Elvo, just the other side of 112th Street. G144 on Bluff Road in between 27th Street and 40th Street, and F225 on McKelvey Road. All of these structures are WPA era bridges that will be replaced with box culverts. And then the combo structures, J143, H130, and H128, and they're all on 148th Street. All of these are bridges, small bridges, that had the rails cut off the side of them and 3 to 5 feet of fill put on top of them in 1968. They are under what's called bridge length, so they are bridges, but they're less than 20 feet in span, so the state doesn't consider them a bridge. Which is why they were not inspected on an annual basis. We did discover last year, the week before Thanksgiving, that these structures were critical. And I did go ahead and put a couple pictures in here just so you could see. So one of the things that we discovered that is based on standard engineering calculations, these bridges should not be holding up under their own weight. That's a little tragic, except for they have since 1968. So in the middle picture, you'll see Mr. Packard. He is our structural engineer, standing underneath the center line of 148th Street. There is a 6 to 8 foot hole underneath all three of these structures at approximately the center line because there was a box culvert on either end, but the middle was still left soil. So these structures, although we did do some very detailed finite element analysis with the Department of Transportation, and with the university, in order to get them open or keep them open for the last several months. They are quickly deteriorating, and I kind of can't really believe they've made it this long. So I do want to thank, though, the university and the Department of Transportation. There's over 5,000 cars a day on 148th Street, and just replacing these is going to be very burdensome to the surrounding communities, but we really need to do it in order to make sure people are safe. The slow sign shown on the far right is when we came in to net these bridges to make sure we could keep the birds out of them. And in one case, we did discover that the walls behind the box culvert abutments were actually hollow, and we had to shut the road down again and do emergency restoration to all four sides of this structure. On the bottom are some of the pictures of the renovations we did to Bridge H120. That's in the Camp Creek drainage basin. The picture on the left is the before picture, and you can actually see the storm pipe kind of in the center of that picture off to the side a little bit. The picture on the right is the riprap embankment we did. You can see the pipe where it really should have been. We shored this in, and then we went ahead and we laid soil back over the top of it, and in a really dense type of mat that grows grass. And we know now that if we lay soil over the top of the rock and really get some good grass growing in there, that holds that rock in a lot better. FY18. So in FY18, as you see the map up on the screen, we have a couple of interesting projects. I worked with Department of Roads for about 2 years to get a partnership made with the north part of Branched Oak Lake. So Lancaster County has the most rec roads of any county in the state. We have over 40 miles of state recreation roads. Only they're not really state roads. We maintain them at Lancaster County, and so we remove the snow and we patch them, and when it's time to overlay, we overlay. Traditionally, the state has shared in those overlays 80-20. The best I could do with multiple years of negotiation was 60-40. And so that is of concern. This will be a 2-inch mill and overlay, not a traditional 3-inch overlay, because of the sensitivity of some of the environment on the north side of the lake. You do see on this map Raymond Road from Highway 79 over to 1st Street, and you'll see a little X that indicates Bridge C91. So that was also in last year's plan. It was really my intent to construct that bridge and overlay that road this year, except for as I was ready to put the bridge out to bid, the state came to me and said, no, wait, Pam, we have several structures on Highway 79 that need to be replaced and overlaid, and we just found enough money to do it, so you need to wait. And we're going to use Raymond Road and that bridge for our detour. And I said, but wait a second, ladies and gentlemen, on a sufficiency scale of 100 points, that bridge is a 27. I don't think we should use it as a detour. I think you should let me replace my bridge. I didn't win that argument, but I tried. They have agreed that if anything happens to our little bridge, why the detour is on it, that they will pay for it. So I was kind of happy about that. In any case, as soon as the state is done using this as their detour, we're going to go ahead and overlay that stretch of road and replace that bridge. Next year also, it's my intent to pave 98th Street from Old Cheney to A. 98th Street is currently the only road that we have ever really graded to meet the existing RUTS interlocal agreement, rural to urban transition section. With that being said, I know that Mr. Berkland from the city is here, and we've had a few discussions because we've never actually paved a RUTS road that we've graded, and this is the only one. The section that's laid out in the interlocal agreement doesn't really work. It's a nice theory, and Mr. Berkland and I are still kind of coordinating how we're going to get that in, but this is 3 miles of pavement. We now know that we have over 700 cars a day on this stretch of gravel. We also know that our gravel really falls apart at about 300 cars a day. In addition, This graded extra wide section, which would meet the future 4-lane divided section, hasn't really behaved very nicely as a gravel road, and that probably shouldn't really be a surprise to any of us. So it started off being a 24-foot wide gravel road, and now it's over 40 feet wide, which makes it impossible to maintain. We have various other asphalt overlay projects we're going to do next year that can be seen on this map in purple. In addition to that, we are looking at, we're still coordinating with Department of Transportation on Saltillo. They have agreed that Saltillo has a safety problem, and Saltillo should be a safety project. I was hoping really to have something confirming in writing from them before I got to the presentation today, and I appreciate you guys waiting an extra 2 hours for me, but I don't have anything in writing today yet, and maybe I will next week, but we're very, very close, and I really appreciate that. So just a brief summary. In addition to that, I talked about bridges. Bridges E117 and N19 are bridges that were damaged by the flooding in 2015. These bridges we do hope to replace next year. They were a little more, they had a little more complex issues than some of our other bridges. And then of course B147 will be a conversion from a box culvert, or from a bridge to a box culvert. It is currently a closed bridge, and it's been closed for over a year right now. In addition to that, we'll do major maintenance on Bridge O175. And where is that, you might ask? Well, that is over West Pioneers in the Wilderness Park area. And so we know that, that Salt Creek in that zone during the flood of 2015 dropped about 3 feet. And so what's happened is now we have all the adjacent creeks and drainage ways wanting to drop to meet that. And in conjunction and coordination with the City of Lincoln Stormwater Management and with the NRD, we're going to put drop structures at Old Cheney and Pioneers. And so the first one to go in is at Pioneers, and then later I'll talk to you about the one at Old Cheney. And then H19. So and you might have heard the number H120. H19 is just south of H120. It's also in very bad shape. It's and it's on 176th Street in between Bluff and Waverly Road. What's significant about this bridge is I've said a lot of prayers this summer because this bridge is hanging on by a thread, and I do mean a thread. My prayers were because if indeed I did have to close Bridge H119, it would leave several families landlocked from their homes. And so I'm really glad that I did not have to do that. But in any case, we're going to go ahead and get that bridge fixed so that we don't have to worry about it as much. If I'm to go on to FY 19 through 24, of course, the continuation of the Saltillo project, which has been discussed as shoulders, really from Highway 77 to clear out to about 58th Street. A mile of that will be in the city. And again, Mr. Berklin is here, and he can discuss the partnership in that. But it is our intent to coordinate with the City of Lincoln to get the best, most contiguous project for that corridor. Also, we do have a few more bridges that we're looking at as we move forward. In particular, Bridge F88, which is on North 14th Street, about 2 miles north of Stonebridge Creek, located within the City of Lincoln. This bridge is in very bad shape. We know we need to fix it. It has actually been on our 1 and 6 road plan since the late 90s. And so I think that just gives a little more depth to how far behind we are in county engineering. And then you see the long red line in the upper right-hand corner of the map for this. And so what that is 162nd Street. And this is a little more of singing the same song. We graded that for pavement as a farm-to-market route in 1978. It currently has over 400 trucks a day on it and has become very, very difficult to maintain. The more interesting thing about this is for continuity of the system with many of our adjacent counties is once we reach the county line, it's paved. And so it would connect Ceresco, Ashland, and even on up into Fremont and Wahoo. It opens up a major corridor for us. I think that's probably why we see so much traffic on it right now. As we go down to the south of the map, we know that we're going to have a lot of projects that we have to coordinate in conjunction with the South Beltway, and that with the Beltway being estimated for start of construction in 2020, we kind of need to get going on that. So the Hickman area is kind of interesting because it has 68th Street into Hickman, but then 54th Street, the last 2 miles from Roca to Hickman aren't paved into Hickman. And if you go over 82nd Street, what will end up being the last 2 miles up to the South Beltway aren't paved. So that means that when 68th Street, the intersection is being constructed, or the interchange is being constructed for the South Beltway, there'll be no direct paved route into Hickman. And we simply must find a way to pave at least 54th Street into Hickman. In addition to that, that road has a lot of traffic on it. We know well over 5,000 cars a day. It doesn't have shoulders on it. And for the last mile and a half into Hickman, or from Hickman south all the way down to Norris. And so I do review accident reports in my office, and there's been a number of accidents on 68th Street, and I really think it's time that we go ahead and do whatever we can to get shoulders at least the mile and a half into town. And we are prepared to coordinate that project with the city of Hickman. So, with that, lastly, I'd like to say, you know, we're in an interesting time for our roads, and whether it's me dealing with our rural roads out in the county or Mr. Birkeland dealing with the urban roads in the city, one thing we know is that we have really nearly reached the same fatality rates as we had in the 1950s, and it's really largely because of distracted driving. I've been doing a lot of speaking, actually, and guest speaking, even at driver's ed classes, about the importance of not doing distracted driving. We all do it. In fact, I was a couple minutes late driving out to Waverly for the driver's ed class on Sunday, and I really wanted to text that driver's ed teacher and say, hey, I'm just going to be fine. You know, we have to stop that, and we have to realize that, you know, when we get in our car every day, that we have either the best tool or the worst weapon that we could have in our possession. And so one of the things we've been doing at County Engineering is we're stepping forward to do a lot more awareness on what distracted driving means to our citizens. I love Don't Be the Phony, Don't Be That Driver, which is really a Maryland campaign that is open source data, and put your phone down or put your car in a ditch. And so there's some urban type driver awareness, and there's some rural type driver's awareness, and my department is committed to continuing to move forward to do more about distracted driving and safety, which is a big problem. And so with that, I will ask if you have any questions.
Questions?
I have one.
Sandra.
You mentioned one project being proposed as a safety project. And I wanted to know if there was a different funding source for that. Why did you mention it as a specialty?
So, and that was Saltillo that has been proposed as a safety project. And Mr. Birkeland and I think, have been meeting off and on with the state for about 2 years. I actually have it on a little bigger map here. Are we switching? There we go. Saltillo, so you see it shown here in blue for next year, blue for engineering. So yeah, we can actually apply to the state for a safety project, and there's some super nerdy requirements that go into that, but kind of in short, what happens is we look at all the traffic accidents in that corridor, and they are all assigned by standard engineering calculations a dollar amount for every type of accident. And then we go back and we look at what sort of improvements would alleviate those accidents. And if the cost to benefit ratio is greater than 1, then we can get safety money for that project. And so it was, of course, for Saltillo, much greater than 1. And I think our initial study when we came forward was maybe a 3.75 or almost a 4-to-1. And so we kind of added a few more improvements in there because it is a corridor that has a lot of traffic on it and very steep side slopes on the embankments and no shoulders. And so we're looking to see what we can do to make that corridor safer. And it really has a little bit of everything, as far as it has rear end accidents, it has leave the road accidents, it has turning vehicle accidents, it has deer car accidents. Really, really not a safe corridor. So,
as a person who drives that road every day, I really appreciated the big signs that says most dangerous road in the county.
And you know, that sign has been a little controversial, and the commissioners actually thought I asked someone to put that sign up, and I'll just say I did not. I did not ask someone to put that sign up, but I do appreciate that. I think that sign brings a little more awareness to some of the drivers in the corridor. So,
yep. Other questions? Thank you. Is there testimony in support of this item?
Good afternoon, Lonnie Birkeland, City of Lincoln Public Works Department, Assistant Director of Transportation. Thanks for your service and being here on a long afternoon. I just quickly wanted to convey from the Public Works side of the house in similar fashion to the Planning Department. We also have reviewed Ms. Dingman's 1 and 6 year plan and are fully supportive of that and the projects that are within it. She mentioned we have had several productive and very positive conversations on some of these fringe roadway projects and some of the new standards and things we're looking at in those sections like South 98th Street. There's a lot of exciting work going to be going on, and we just want to be on record and say that we support the plan. So, could answer any questions.
Questions? Nope. Thanks.
Thank you.
Others in support? Testimony in opposition? No? Okay. Any questions for Pam?
Can I, just
Tracy.
one question, and it's really more about me being a novice commissioner than anything else. Our review and approval of this, or deciding that it's in conformance with the comprehensive plan, how does that connect with the funding or the budget for road improvement projects? It doesn't at all, correct? I mean...
Well, the 1 and 6 has several requirements that are set forth by state statute. And so, of course, we have the 1950s local resolution that asks that it come to planning board. And then from here, it will actually go on. It has another step that it will go forward to the commissioners. Sure. And we'll have a public hearing on it that has actually been set for November 7th at 7 in this room. So we'll kind of go through it all again. Members of the public will be invited to come and participate in it. Sometimes the 1 and 6 seems like it comes in a little late, and what really happens is I have to wait until my budget is in, and then it's really that budgeted money, and then that budgeted money projected forward. But in addition to that, there's a requirement that the 1 and 6 be approved for the comprehensive plan. And I'll look to the expert. Did I say anything wrong there?
No. David Carey with the Planning Department. It's a very good question, and probably I guess a good way to think about this is that the 1 and 6 for the county is similar, not the same, but similar to as the CIP is for the city side. And so we asked the Planning Commission, we're required actually, that the Planning Commission take action on both the 1 and 6 and the CIP for a review of conformity to the comprehensive plan.
Okay.
So it's a requirement, it's a step for both planning documents, and then ultimately becomes part of those respective budgets. But the budget is not necessarily what is being asked of you.
Understood.
Right. We had good conversations about this in the past. You know, I think the best way to think about how the budget could play into this is that if there was zero money put towards I'll just use the obvious one for this year for Pam, bridges. You could have a robust conversation at this point and put it on the record and say, does not seem to be adequate to meet the needs of the county. We'd like to put that in the record, but it still wouldn't be your action to say that you should put X amount of dollars in. It would be more if you could potentially say this is not in conformance with the comprehensive plan.
Got it. Thank you. And I mean, the challenge is that, I mean, there's so much detail, of course, and so much information. certainly beyond our purview as non-experts in this field, and we really do have to defer to your background and expertise. And so it's a little challenging to know what our role is. Certainly, the information is very helpful and very useful in understanding the growth and the continued development of both things within the city and within the county. But thank you for that clarification.
Do you have anything to add?
I think lastly, I'd like to add, the 1 and 6 then is filed with the State Department of Transportation, and we're required to file that in order to get our highway allocation dollars.
Got it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions? Okay, I think then we're ready for a motion.
Move approval, Edgerton.
Second, Beckius.
Discussion.
I just want to say that I appreciate what Pam does with her budget. I know that funds are tight, and she does the best that she can to get everything accomplished.
The information that you presented was excellent and really provided some clarity. As I was wading through reading the report, your testimony certainly helps round that out and get a better understanding of what's going on in the county.
Anyone else?
I'll compliment you on the distracted driving deal. I absolutely agree with you, and I wish the legislature would do something about that.
Yep. Others?
You're here.
Okay, let's call the vote.
Okay, this is for finding of conformance with the comprehensive plan comprehensive plan conformance number 17016. Beckius?
Yes.
Edgerton?
Yes.
Finnegan?
Yes.
Harris?
Yes.
Hove?
Yes.
Joy?
Yes.
Washington?
Yes.
Core?
Yes.
Shear?
Yes.
Motion carried 9-0.
This time, anyone wishing to speak on an item not on the agenda may do so. I see no one here, so we are adjourned. Thank you.